Everyone loved the OpenClaw video I posted last week, so today I'm going to architect and build the AI content engine that will actually run this channel and replace tools like TubeSpanner and vidIQ for me. We're going to use my Atlas framework inside Claude Code and go from planning to a working MVP over the next 3 hours. My goal is to dump as much real-world experience as possible, the same methods I've used over the last 12 years architecting systems for some of the biggest companies on the planet. If you want to learn how to actually build AI systems and not just watch hype, this is for you. Let's get into it. Okay, so let's have a look at our working prototype to start off. We can see we got our dashboard over here, pulling in my videos. We have a few quick actions down here to write a script or generate a title, stuff like that. Our analytics page shows us a little bit more analytics about our channel. We can click on our videos to deep dive into them to find out any specifics that we need. We have our creator profile. This is where we come and update all of our own information that later on fills our content and things like that, with our sign off and our content pillar and things. We can generate our titles from here using OpenAI. And then we have our complete script writer, which, as you can see, will write a script in whatever format you want. For me, it's bullet points that go into Markdown. And we can generate our thumbnails from here, and we can also change the title just by clicking this little spanner. But then finally, we have our content calendar, and this is where we can come in and plan our system. And inside there, we get a preview of what this post is going to look like when it's on YouTube, with the title, the thumbnail, the description that we can generate at the time based on the actual transcript itself over here before we then push it off into YouTube land. So that's pretty cool for version 1 working prototype. Over the next 3 hours, we're going to look and see how we got to this stage. And then in another video, we're going to cover how we can make this even better and expand it to work on LinkedIn and other content systems as well. So let's get into this one. Okay, so we're going to start this video based off of a whole bunch of stuff that I learned from the previous video that went viral. So a lot of people loved that video, and you blatantly asked for a long build video so you could see my thought patterns. You liked watching me break things down and you wanted to see more of that. But you also had a lot of questions about the way that we'd set things out there and how all of this mystical stuff works when we're talking to Claude Code. So I wanted to kind of strip it down to its bones so that we can understand very clearly. And then we're going to walk through an entire build from start till finish. I'm purposefully going to make mistakes. I'm going to plan things as best as I can, but they're also going to go wrong along the way. And we're going to go on this whole journey, and I'll try and put in some client stories and things like that along the way about how I would approach this, just to make it more valuable to you. But first, we need to start right at the beginning. So if you're pretty technically inclined and you don't care about learning about the framework again, or you saw it in the last video, you can probably skip ahead a little bit. I'm going to start with the questions first, and then we'll get into the build. So the first thing that came up is that people asked me, is it okay that this thing is making mistakes? Every time I try and use it, it does build something, but there is a mistake. And that is a massive problem that YouTube is actually creating at the moment. Is you see these guys like, I built this 10K app, bro. It only took me 40 minutes live on film. And it's like, no. That's fine. You built this little thing for YouTube to go and showcase something. I totally get that. But realistically, if we are approaching this for a client, or even if we're trying to build a prototype for ourselves, there are going to be mistakes, and mistakes are good. Just like with humans, failure is how we learn. It is the best possible mechanism your brain has for learning something. So if you're building something with this AI and it fails, it's good for the AI and it's good for you. Because if we've baked in a self-learning loop where this thing documents its failures, like we have in this environment we're looking at, but it also helps you understand when something goes wrong because, oh, that didn't work because of reason X, Y, Z. Now I understand how this thing works because together with AI, I fixed this thing. And that kind of brings me into a second talking point here about critical thinking, where everyone is kind of outsourcing the way they think and the way they approach things to this AI to just build me something quickly. This AI assistant does everything. Cool. What happens when you get to a client side? What happens if you try and sell something? What happens if you try and have a conversation with somebody about this? You cannot articulate your thoughts. You have no idea how the thing works. So what value do you have beyond being able to press enter on your keyboard? So those two things are really fundamental. You should fail. I've failed so many times in my life, and I'm grateful for it because every single time I learned. But then secondly, through those failures, I learned to articulate myself better. Or learning instruments, you fail. Oh, those notes don't go together. Okay, cool. I'm going to try something different next time until it's muscle memory for your brain. So please, guys, don't believe all of that trash you see on YouTube where guys are building that stuff. It's really awesome to see that, and they're doing a great job. But at the same time, it's not the reality. It doesn't need to instill fear in you. It doesn't need to make you think that you can't build this thing because it's this scary black box and it should never make mistakes. Bullshit. Make mistakes, have fun, but do it with guardrails, and that's what we're going to get into next. The second question that people had, if I use this thing, is it going to break anything? And realistically, it could break something if you give it the permission to do so. Now, if you're using myclaud.md, it obviously has a little bit of guardrails in, but you still need to obviously use your own discrepancy here. I'm not putting any form of guarantee on this. If you go and give this thing write, delete, and update permissions on an email, it could do anything really. If you give it access to the internet and all of those permissions to do those things, sure, it can do those things. Which is why if you don't really know what you're doing, don't come on down to the screen and just bypass permissions and let it YOLO your entire life if you've given it access to everything. But there are a few simple rules that you can follow here. So for me, I've given my agent workforce over here pretty much access to most of my stuff. It has email, it has MCP servers into my end-to-end workflows. It has my entire business in the context folder over here. So a lot of information. But I treat it in the sense that my emails are not going to have write access. So it connects to my Gmail via an API. And the only thing that it has access to is to read stuff. So I don't care if it reads my personal emails. This is, again, not for client emails, because that's another aspect you have to take into account is data privacy and things like that. I have a whole video on that. But I wouldn't want to give my agent access to my client emails because then it's siphoning everything into the training models of Claude. And we don't want that because that's a data privacy leak. So you've got to think about things like that. But read access for my personal stuff where people are coming to me or I'm doing personal related tasks, I don't care. This thing can read all the emails at once because it helps me as my personal assistant on that front. But it doesn't have write access, so it can't email people. And it doesn't have delete access or edit access, so it can't do anything funny. So you've got to think about the things that you're doing that way. Set in the scope right in the beginning about what you actually want this thing to do. And anything that's pretty scary, you can blatantly say to this thing, once you've built it, you can just ask it, hey, is there any way you could cause any trouble for me? Have we got a human in the loop? Stuff like that. Ask it to create the guardrails for you if you don't understand what you're doing and you are afraid. This thing will help you do that. The third question that you guys had is actually about the framework they're going to get into very soon. You asked if this can be used with Gemini or Codex or something like that, and the answer is yes. So if I was using this exact file with Gemini or with Codex, all you have to do is change the name. Now, each model has their own .md. So for Claude, it's obviously Claude.md. Gemini has Gemini.md, and ChatGPT has agent.md. I don't know what Grok is. I've never really used Grok. Point being is that you can change it and use it for whatever you want because it's not like, this is not an app. It's not a piece of software. It's literally an instruction manual that's telling this AI orchestrator here how to respond within the environment that we're using. And in this case, my environment is just VS Code. You could use this in anti-gravity. You could use this in any IDE. So again, the biggest thing to take away here is to think of this not as a software because it in itself is not software. It's literally a system handbook, how this will operate if we have this in our environment. Think of it like starting a new job. You go to a business hands you a book and they say, this is how we function. You never deviate from this book or you're out of here. You open the book and all you see are these rules that we have written down here and you're like, oh, okay, I know how this business functions, so I'm just going to make sure that I stay in this lane and do what it asks me to do, and then I'm a good employee. That's all we've done here. That's all that this little file does. So don't worry too much about that. We'll get into this very soon. And then finally, the last question was, can this thing nuke my entire computer? And that answer is a little bit nuanced because it's no, but also yes. And that depends on how you set this thing up. So all we're talking about here, again, is an IDE, which is just something that helps us build in software development. This interface over here, and essentially all it is a folder structure. This over here are just a bunch of folders on my computer. Same thing if we were using anti-gravity, it's pretty similar interface. But the point is, whatever folder we use as our root folder for this agent that we're talking to, it will essentially have access to do stuff within that folder. Now for me, you can see I've created a folder on my computer called VS Agent Workforce. And that is a separate folder on my hard drive. It can only operate within this space unless I explicitly tell it you can go and access downloads or you can access my documents. It will always ask you anyway. If you're on a Mac, it's really good security and permission things baked in. So a pop-up will come on and say, Claude Code wants to access whatever folder. You can easily just decline that. But in most cases, it's not going to bother doing that because it can build whatever it needs to within this environment. So the rule here is to just make sure you have a dedicated workspace for whatever we're doing. And that's when you're going to be chucking in the Claude MD in this dedicated workspace so that we don't run into any problems down the line. Because if you had to put this at the root of your drive, let's just say you, on a Windows machine, you put it in your C drive, you would essentially be giving it your whole C drive to play with. So if by some mistake you said, just remove all of this, it could go and delete everything out of your C drive. It could do that. But we're not going to do that because we're smart and we're just creating this folder space over here. We're going to do that right now. And so here is a brand new shiny little workspace in Visual Studio Code. Now, I'm pretty sure most of you know how to download things, so all you would have to do is just Google this and then go follow the link to download it. You can use anti-gravity, like I keep saying, whatever you want. I use this because every time I've used anti-gravity, halfway through a mega build that I'm trying to film for you guys, it kept bombing out and with some random buggy errors, so I've just given up with anti-gravity for another month or two. But for now, we're going to use VS Code. Pretty much works the exact same way in anti-gravity. You see a very similar interface to this, and you would do pretty much the exact same thing. So I'm going to come on over to the left over here, which is our little folder icons, and you just click Open Folder. And all this is doing, you see here's my local drive. I'm just going to create a new folder, and I'm going to call it Build Test. You can call it whatever the hell you want, whatever makes sense for you. My original one was Agent Workforce because it's my workforce. So we're going to open this up, and we're going to trust this because I'm the author of this environment. I trust whatever happens in here. So you can see we're completely fresh. There is absolutely nothing in here compared to the other environment you just saw where I've been building tons of stuff in there. Okay, and now inside our folder, all I've done is dragged and dropped the two files that I've shared in Drive, which is our main Claude MD, which is the orchestrator, as we'll get into very soon, and then the goal file, which is our build app.md, and this orchestrates all of our builds tied to a very good framework for us when we want to build apps. So all you need to do is drag and drop these two little files in here, create a folder called goals, and you do that by just clicking new folder over here and then drag and drop that MD file in there. Really, really straightforward stuff. And then one thing that you're going to do is you're going to need to get the extensions to actually have the agent that can talk to you. So we're going to come on over here to our extensions tab. You can see I've already got mine installed, a whole bunch of them. Some of them might come pre-installed depending on what IDE you're using, but you're going to want to come in here and get whatever agent you're working with. So if you have a subscription or access to Claude or Codex, you're just going to type that into the box here, like you can type in Codex, and it would go and it would find you this. You would click on it and there'll be a little install button here instead of disable, because obviously you don't have it. So you would click on that and that's it. It would then just install it within this environment, and you will get these little tabs up at the top in order to go and do everything that we're about to do in this video. Once we've got that in there, all we're going to do is we're going to come on over here and we're going to open up Claude chat window. Now, if you're using Codex, you can see that I've also got Codex. It would just open up a chat window on another side, and I can talk to either agent and have it initialize our environment the first time. So something to keep in mind here, we're using the official extensions from Anthropic or OpenAI or Gemini, whatever the hell it is that we're using. They're all the official extensions. So in no way is this some weird Claude bot hack. You're not going to get banned by any of these people for using this framework or whatever it is that we're doing. This is how AI and agentic workflows are meant to function. They're built on frameworks. They're built on systems that help govern them in order to get us to the places that we actually want to get to. So don't worry about any of that stuff. But it would be pretty handy to have a subscription to either Claude or OpenAI. Even the $20 ones, they're perfectly good. The only reason I pay for Max is because I build a lot. And I do a lot of POCs and stuff like that for clients and for YouTube, obviously. So it makes business sense for me to do that. But honestly, I used to get away with so much just on one of those $20 plans. But for this video, I'm only going to use Claude because Claude Code gives me everything that I want. I think it's really good. Gemini is pretty good as well, but I have much higher limits with my plan on Claude. So I stick with Claude. And then what we're going to do, if you still have this welcome screen open and you don't want it here, just close it over there. We're going to come over here and all we say is, this is a new environment, please initialize it. And that's it. It's going to come over here and it's going to read our claude.md and it's going to set up our entire environment. We're going to get into this file very, very soon to see how it works. It's going to ask you if it's allowed to do this command, just say yes. It's essentially just creating all of this stuff. Now, for all of my stuff, I just bypass permissions most of the time because I know what I'm doing and I know whether this thing is going to do something I don't want it to or not. But you might want to just go ahead and read everything. If you're very unsure about this and you're super paranoid about your security, you can just click step by step as it goes through this. It will take longer and of course it's less autonomous. But if you're completely new to this and you have no idea what's going on, it's better to be safe than be sorry. So we can see down here, it's now creating our memory tools referenced in the manifest. And that's all governed in this little file here. And it's finished. So you can see here, it's now built out our directory structure, and this looks identical to the one in my full environment. We have our goals, we have our hard prompts, we have our memory, and we have our tools. And I realize at this point, because we haven't done the explainer of Claude.md yet, that this might not make sense to you yet. But I did it this way first just because it ties into people not understanding how to use VS Code at all. So we're going to jump into this file now, and then seeing this structure over here will make more sense. But this thing's going to tell you what it's done every time it's done something. And honestly, if you don't understand something, don't be afraid to just ask this thing, what did you do? Why did you do it this way? Could we have done it another way? Have a conversation with this thing. That's why it's here. It's here to help you learn, help you grow and stuff like that, along with me, obviously. But the point is, while you're building stuff, you want to use this to adapt your own brain, to grow your own knowledge, and to become a better thinker and a better implementer and things like that. So use the tool what it's for. This is why we have AI, to make us better, not the other way around, or to make us brain dead. And we can see here what's ready. So we've got our framework structure in place, the memory database is initialized, daily logging is active, and our memory tools are functional. So it's going to remember things that we talk about in here via a daily log that it stores over here. So every time you do something significant, it will write it down and things like that. And if you don't want memory function, for whatever reason, you can just say this thing, hey, I don't want this memory function, please remove it from here. And it will take it away, in the same sense that we can use this to build anything. So if you do make mistakes down the road, you do get worried about something, I screwed something up, just say, let's roll back that last change, or let's delete this entire app that we just built, I don't want it. Things like that. Don't be afraid. This little environment over here, as long as you isolate it to a specific folder, you're going to be perfectly fine. But now I think we got most of the basics out the way. This is really basic stuff. We can get into the next part where we're going to look at this claude.md file, and we're going to look at the build app.md file so we can talk about those structures, and then we'll get into some really shiny stuff and start building, and I'll walk you through that process too. Alrighty, so claude.md or gemini.md, whatever it is that you're using, this is literally just a system handbook. And like I mentioned in the beginning of this video, you can think of it like someone in a company coming and handing this thing over to you so that it tells you how to operate within an environment. And that's exactly what we've done for our little Claude agent over here. We've given him this little book and we've been like, hey man, this is how a business runs. You need to follow this thing every single time I ask you to do something so that it's done in the exact same way. And we do it this way because AI is probabilistic. Meaning that one time you might ask it to do something and it's going to be like, cool, I'm going to take this approach. But another time it will take that approach and you get a slightly different result. And that's cool, but depending on the task, we might not want that kind of thing. Especially in business, we want deterministic behavior. We want the same result every single time we're doing this thing. So this little handbook over here, it governs those two things and it merges them so that we mix the awesomeness of AI and its probabilistic nature with the deterministic nature of tools and Python scripts and things like that. So this little handbook helps us do that. And we do that with this framework called the Gotcha framework. So the first thing that we have here is G, and these are our goals. So this is what needs to happen. You can think of them like standard operating procedures for the things that we're building or doing, and they're task-specific instructions. So if we look down over here, we already have one that we copied in earlier, which is building an app. Now we're going to skip this framework just for now, and I want to talk just about the goal. So the goal here is to build full stack applications using AI assistants within the Gotcha framework. So straight away, we're just giving this thing a goal. This is its goal, is to build full stack applications. So that's what G stands for, just the goals of our business. And it could be anything. It could be a lead gen outreach system. It could be content system, things like that. We outline them within our goals folder. Then we have the orchestration, and this is the AI manager. And right now I'm telling Claude that it is the AI manager, which is why I say you. And it coordinates all the execution within this environment. So every time I talk to this thing, it reads our claude.md and it knows exactly what to do. It is in charge of orchestration. Then we have tools, and these are the deterministic scripts that do the actual work. They live in this folder over here. So I don't have any in here, but in my other environment, I've got tons of them. And each of them serves a specific function. For instance, if I wanted to do some web scraping, I would have a Python script to do that because I know every single time I want to scrape the web, I want it done the same way, which means we have determinism, and that's what we want. So I take the goal of go and scrape 10 websites in order to get us information to build something specific. I might have a goal that kind of builds this massive task for us, but then part of that, one of the tools to scrape the web would just be a Python script that lives in here and it goes off and does the actual web scraping. So that's how these things come together. The orchestration says, hey man, we need a goal that goes and does this for us. We need to write down a task-specific list of instructions, and then we need to build some tools to help us achieve that goal as a business. And then it comes down here and orchestrates a Python script for us, writes the script that says, this is how you go and scrape the web. Python script runs, feeds back any information back to the orchestration layer, and then it updates the goal if it needs to, or it might even build other tools, whatever the hell it needs to do in order to achieve our goal. So the important part of this whole framework is that we always want to achieve our goals. Just like a business, just like in your own life, you want to achieve your goals. The orchestration layer helps us achieve that with tools. But then obviously, just like in life, we need context, because if we had no form of memory or no understanding of how things work, we wouldn't be able to get anywhere. So we need to have a little folder called context. And this is where you can store anything that's really valuable as context for your system. For me, I've got my entire business in this folder. So everything about Atomic Ops is in there because it helps me build content. It helps understand pricing strategies. It helps me understand my ideal clients, how I reach out to them. Pretty much all of that context, including my personal story. Everything that I want to give this AI goes in there. Now, context could also be RAG. For most people, you probably don't need it because it's just overkill. RAG is much more complex than it needs to be for a lot of the situations that you see online, despite Pinecone being able to spin up in a few minutes. Sometimes a simple database is good enough just to store information that you want to recall later. But more specifically, we also factor in costs and time and latency and all of that stuff. So having a bunch of files in here is way better than having to go to 2 or 3 systems to pull a bunch of information out if it's not needed at all. One of the most popular things you see at the moment is people using Notebook LM with anti-gravity and Gemini. And that's really cool. It's a really cool way to store information and things like that. But equally, MCP comes at a cost. There's also latency. There's also a whole bunch of other things. And if all you're doing is looking up a few files or some documents, just store them in the same folder with everything else. Then the agent can read it directly. So again, that's just over-engineering for either the sake of YouTube or maybe some other reason that I still don't understand. Anyway, I digress. Context is very important for this entire system because coming back to our orchestration layer, this thing needs context. Just like humans need context, we need to understand meaning. We need to understand why things are the way they are or why you want something done in a specific way. So our orchestration needs to know that about our business. If you had to write down here, tell me 10 things about my business without giving it any context, it would look at you funny. So context is really important. Then the next part is hard prompts. And that's literally just a prompt. So these are reusable instruction templates. They are your prompts, essentially. And I store them here for 2 reasons. One, if I have my prompts stored in here as templates, I can run regression testing and other things like that without having to pull them out of specific scripts. So it's a lot easier to run tests and just store them there to be used in multiple systems. But then secondly, it's also just much easier for my brain. If I'm looking for something specific, I don't have to ask this thing, where does this prompt live? I know exactly where it is. I can just come in here and find it, which is way easier. So when you're building a tool, the tool is generally going to be the Python script that runs away and does a whole bunch of tasks for you. As part of those tasks, it might be calling an LLM. For instance, if we're writing content, it might go off to Claude's API or OpenAI's API and invoke a GPT 5.2 session to write you a script for your next video. In doing so, we obviously have a prompt baked in there, as we'll get into later on in this video. But if that script just lives inside a Python script, every time I wanted to have a look at it, I would have to go and open the Python script and find it somewhere embedded inside this Python script, and that's a little bit silly. I can just inject a prompt during runtime, which is perfectly fine to do. And that way, easier for me to read and find, do run testing on outside of having to pull it in a script. So just a little bit of information there. Hopefully I'm not overwhelming anyone at this point. It's literally just a folder to store your prompts. Then finally, we have arguments, and these are behavioral settings that shapes how our system acts at a specific time. They're just variables, and they're going to live in this folder over here. So I think one thing to do just to nail this home is I'll switch back to my built environment and I'll show you a few things lying around in there. Cool, so you can see I've got a lot of stuff in here. Let's come and have a look at the goals first. You can see I've got so many goals in here. I've got my AI news monitor, build app, catalog dashboard, niche outliers, email digest. So these are some of the things that I built on YouTube. These are some of the things that run in the background. Some video editing stuff that I've got in here, LinkedIn posting, content pipelines, stuff like that. These are all the goals. And if we come and have a look here, again, you can see the goal is an AI news monitor SOP. Our goal is to monitor multiple AI news sources for content relevant to my YouTube channel, score for relevance, and alert via Slack for high priority items. That is our goal. And that's all a goal is. It's a text file outlining how the orchestration layer should implement a goal. What is used? So we look here, what gets delivered? Immediate Slack alerts, daily digest, weekly roundup, databases. The inputs that are required. For this goal to be achieved, we are going to need an OpenAI API key, a Slack bot token, Perplexity API key. What tools do we use in order to achieve this goal? So then it comes and it looks at our tool folder. Scrape hackernews.py, that's just a Python script that goes into our tools folder and runs away when we need it to. Newsdb.py, the purpose of this is to check items against the database, filter duplicates, and then we describe the inputs and the outputs. So again, we'll get into context engineering in a little bit, but every single part of your system, you have what goes into the system and what is the expected output. And that makes sure that we get the deterministic function every single time we're running this thing. So our orchestration layer over here, Claude Code in this case, uses these goal files very specifically in order to achieve this. And you can see how we've broken it down, with the goal being the high-level thing that we want, and then we break down every single step of how we achieve this goal. What are we going to be using in our environment in order to achieve this goal? It's not software, it's not magic, it's literally English. It is me outlining with context engineering exactly what I want done. And if you think to yourself, holy shit, I have no idea how to do any of this, really there's no need to worry, because even if you can't think like this yet, hopefully with some of my videos, it will help you to start thinking that way. But also, you can jumpstart by asking this thing to help you with the context engineering in your systems. You can get it to guide you through examples of this based on our framework. Because we have given this little claude.md file to our orchestration layer, it understands exactly how things are meant to be built from a context engineering perspective and all of that. So it will help you each time you want to do something. It will help you learn, and it will help you understand why we are breaking down our goals in that way. Because if we look a little bit further down, after we've seen all the tools that it needs in order to complete the job, again, I didn't have to tell it to use these tools. It created these tools because it analyzed how am I going to achieve this goal, and then it wrote all of these tools for me. So I didn't write this out myself. But if we come down here, it also describes the process flow that it needs to take. Again, it decided what it would need to do in order to achieve its goal. That's why this framework is so important. But two, starting with the goal and reverse engineering how to get there is the most important thing you can do, because it helps you map out this process flow like it did here. And then it lists the scoring criteria. So how are we going to score what good news is for me? It puts that in here. We come further down, what is a viral indicator that would help boost the score? Stuff like that. Scheduling, when are we going to run this thing? How often does it run? Stuff like that. What edge cases do we need to look for? In this case, it said, what if there's no new items? What if there's API failures? How are we going to respond to these things? Because it's very important to bake in error handling and things like that. I suppose at this point, I can use that as a segue into the next part of this claude.md file, which is over here. And we can see that this structure exists because when AI tries to do everything itself, errors compound fast, you lose accuracy, and basically a whole bunch of silly things can happen if we don't provide the context and, again, map that probabilistic nature with something that's more deterministic. So that's why this thing exists. And if we have our gotcha framework briefly explained up at the top here, what I do further down in the file is I just give Claude Code a little bit more information about what each layer does. For goals, we list them as task-specific instructions in clear markdown. Each goal defines the objective, the inputs, which tools to use, the expected outputs, and any edge cases that we might find. And that's how it knows how to structure this goals folder with the files inside it. Written like you're briefing someone competent, only modified with explicit permission, so it's never going to just randomly go and change things. And goals tell the system what to achieve, not how it should behave. That's a very important distinction when we're looking at this system. Then we have the orchestration layer, and this again is the manager. We have our execution layer, which are the tools, and they all live in here. And you can see I've got quite a lot of tools in here. For this one in initn, this one converts anything that I build in initn, it will convert it to Python format, or vice versa. So I can convert anything I build in my agentic solution into initn. And that's really important to do that because it means you can prototype really, really fast, but then you can sell something that either a client might understand or something that's more reliable to a client if you don't know coding yourself. I have an entire video on that as well that you should check out on the screen. But that brings us down to the orchestration layer. So you can see here it reads the relevant goal, so it reads the above, decides which tools it needs, it applies arguments to shape the behavior if it needs to, and then it references any context for the specific goal that we're trying to achieve from our context folder over here. It handles any errors, it asks clarifying questions, and it makes the judgment calls. And that's what AI is for. It's there for judgment. You're going to see when we get into the build, I'll talk a little bit about MCP later on, when to use it, why to use it, and why often a lot of people don't use it properly. Point is, this thing is our little manager. And then we have the tools, which are hopefully self-explanatory at this point. Each one has one specific job for a specific use case, whether it's an API call, data processing, file operations, grabbing something from a database, whatever. They're fast, documented, testable, and most importantly, they are deterministic. Then we have something over here called the manifest.md. Now this exists for both goals and for tools, and it's very important to have this file because it helps the AI understand what's actually in these folders. Now, if this wasn't here, every single time the AI wanted to create a new goal or a new tool or something, let's say I asked it to build me a content creation system. The first time it builds it, it's obviously not going to be there, and that's fine. Then it will come into this manifest file and it will update it, saying, I built this content creation system, it lives here, it does this thing. Now, if we didn't have this baked in here, it would have to go through every single tool in this tools folder to figure out if there was a script related to the content system somewhere in here. So a manifest is exactly what it says on the tin. It just gives the orchestration layer information about what is currently in our environment and what it can use for which purpose. So tools are organized into subfolders by workflow category. Memory is persistent memory, embeddings, and semantic search. Messaging is Telegram and Slack direct API integration, stuff like that. Talks a little bit about the memory system and how it works because memory is a tool in our environment. We'll get into that soon. Point being, this is just a manifest. Tells you what to use and when to use it. But it is vital to our infrastructure because it saves a ton of tokens and a ton of time for Claude when you're building stuff. So don't worry, you don't have to manually go and update that either. Every time this thing builds something, it will update it for you automatically. Then I just talk about the prompts again. So reusable prompts, I've already been through that with you guys. Then I tell it a little bit how to operate. So check for existing goals first. Before starting a task, check our goals manifest.md for a relevant workflow. If goals exist, follow it. Goals define the full process for common tasks. And then equally, obviously, if they didn't exist, it would go and create that goal. And the exact same thing for tools. We're checking the manifest. If it exists, use it. If it doesn't, create it and then make it work with our goal. Then we have step 3, and this is where like the self-healing starts. So when a tool fails, fix and document first. Very important. Read the error and stack trace carefully. Update the tool to handle the issue. Ask if API credits are required. Sometimes you just run out of API credits, and that's a very common problem. Sometimes you don't even know about it. But this thing will tell you, hey, you're getting this error code. It could mean that you don't have API cred. Add what you learned from the goal. So if there were rate limits, batching rules, timing quirks, or any kind of problem that it runs into while it's building a specific system for you, it is going to document it as part of that failure process. Which is why I told you in the beginning of this video, do not be afraid to fail. This thing is really good at failing, and hopefully you can learn from it by being okay with failure too. Then next up, treat goals as living documentation, so you only update when better approaches or API constraints emerge. So your goals could be static a lot of the time, but mine change a lot. As this landscape evolves, as I learn more about whatever it is that I'm doing in this world, I might want to go and update my goals to make them more efficient. Sometimes after I build something, I say, cool, this is finished. How can we make this entire system even more efficient? And then I'll switch it back to plan mode, and it will think about what we've done. It will analyze everything it did the first time around, and we'll redo it even more efficiently. You can switch models and get it to do it that way. Tons of different things that you can play around here, but remember that it is living. AI is evolving. Things are going to change fast. So we want to make sure that we are updating when we want to. But equally, we never want to modify or create goals without explicit permission. And this is one of the guardrails that I baked in. I don't want this thing to just YOLO and do a whole bunch of stuff that I don't want it to do. So it's only going to create these goals when I ask it to. They are the instruction manual for our system. Then also, I never want this thing to just YOLO through life. So if it doesn't know something, it will explain what's missing. It will tell me what's missing. It won't make stuff up and just to try and please me. I don't want that from a robot, just my wife. But unfortunately, I can't prompt her. So this is the best I can get away with in this kind of system and this environment, is to just put in simple guardrails that not just protect you, but also help the way that this thing builds. Not just protect you, but also help the way that this thing builds, because the more context and the more information that directs it to be intelligent, the more you're going to get out of the system. Then next up, we have some actual guardrails in here, and this isn't some crazy security level thing. I have been working in cybersecurity, but I'm pretty chill with my privacy and all sorts of those things in there. So as long as this doesn't tell somebody to go and jump off a bridge or something like that, I'm okay with what it does, because I know if it's doing something that it shouldn't be doing. So these are very basic guardrails, and if you wanted to be more strict, you can just come in here and say, hey, how can we make our guardrails better? What more could we add to this? But at this point, I think this is pretty self-explanatory. I'm just telling it what not to do, or giving it a way that it needs to behave so that it doesn't cause any trouble for me. One of the most effective things you could bake in if you're completely unsure about anything is you could just put in a guardrail that says any external facing system that communicates with people, always speak to me before executing something. And then you're pretty much baking in a human in the loop for every single thing that you do where you reach out to someone. I didn't put that in here because I do it specifically within my goals or in my tools. It knows from that perspective. Then, in case you were wondering how we got this thing to have a little bit of memory, or how it initializes all of this stuff on its first run, well, that's specifically because Claude and other agents, they're all built to check if this file exists when they initialize, when they run. So for our first run, we baked in some stuff that not only just builds out all of this stuff, but will also build out the memory for the system. So this thing has a little bit of baked in memory. If we come and have a look over here, we just have another markdown file, memory.md. And again, plain English, persistent memory. This file contains curated long-term facts, preferences, and context that persist across sessions. The AI reads this at the start of each session. You can edit this file directly. You could put in false memories here if you want, and as much things as you want. Again, it just kind of aligns with the context, but this is more put in here from working in real time with the tool, so it will remember specific things. And I imagine at some point this will be less important. I put this in here specifically because people were using Claude Bot and they wanted to have some form of working memory in there. Obviously, it's nice to have, but I think down the line, you'll be able to use Claude Code efficiently with its own memory functions. You can already have memory directly from Claude in here, so you'll get all of your memories just like you do with ChatGPT. But I don't really care about having memory in here in this traditional sense of like my ChatGPT has memory and it knows things about me. I don't really care that much about it because I'm using this specifically for business and for builds. I can get by just fine on context. But I baked this in because I saw it in Claude Bot and I really just want to test it out to see what we can do just with simple MD files and like a SQL database. So that's why I baked this in. But one thing I would say to you is when you're looking at all of these things on YouTube, you've got to think about what is functional for you in a business versus what is just cool on TV. Like how many people actually use Telegram to run their business in the sense of, if I'm going to get leads, do I need to use Telegram for that? No. Because if I'm doing proper lead gen, I've done lead scoring, I've done filtering, I've researched 80 really good leads that I know are aching to buy my solution, as opposed to just opening up Telegram and saying, find me 200 leads. That's one way to do lead gen, but it's a lot better to do a much more tactical lead gen that we can have completely automated while I'm sleeping without needing to use Telegram at all. That's what automation is. I mean, that's what we've built in here, is this backend function that takes care of all that crap and then uses HeyReach to go and find leads for me. So when you're looking at the system, when you're looking to build, think about functional things. Don't think about what looks good. Think about what suits your needs best and can we do it in the best possible way? Because I never use Telegram or Slack to talk to this thing. Why would I? There is a chat window here. I don't need to introduce latency or any other problems by opening up Telegram and talking to Telegram. Why? There's a chat window here. So think about that whenever you're building something. It makes sense from a point of view if you're getting a daily update for like all of your emails and a whole bunch of work things that come through. You want a single screen, sure. Get it sent automatically to your Telegram and you just read it once a day so you don't have to open your email or check your Slack at the same time, stuff like that. Then it makes sense. But for building stuff for clients, it does not make sense in my eyes. I think it's ridiculous and I think it just makes for some good flashy TV. But we're nearing the end of this file, so that was just the memory part, and it does this on initialization. It checks you, the user, if you have your memory databases and stuff set up. If you don't, it will go and set all of them up for you like it did at the beginning of this video, where it baked in the memory and all of those things here. But again, whether or not this is really important, I don't know yet, and I think somewhere down the line, we're probably just going to all be switching to have this automatically switched on within our environments when we're using it. I think definitely with Claude Cowork. This is plain English, so if you really wanted to go into this, you could come and have a look in here and see how it all works together. But then as we near the end of this file, you see we have the continuous improvement loop. So every failure strengthens the system. We identify what broke and why. We fix the tool. We test until it works reliably. Then we update the goal with the new knowledge that we learned from the failure. Next time, we have automatic success. And again, super important to fail because we learn and grow. Then we have the file structure, which is just all of the stuff on the left. I'm telling it exactly where things live and what I want. You can rename this stuff to whatever you want, whatever makes sense to your brain. You can call goals anything you want. You can call them SOPs, standard operating procedure, whatever you want. And then finally, there's just a little bit of context about where to store temporary files and things like that. And then I tell it its job in one sentence, just reminding it what its goal is, what its purpose is. So that is a really long deep dive into Claude.md and how it governs this entire system. And again, it's not software, it's just English, it's just an instruction manual. And so this was the first file, the Claude.md, that governs this entire system. But then specifically when we're building apps in particular, we need to come into our goals folder over here and look at our buildapp.md. So this little file over here is specifically for when we're building apps. And the goal here, as I mentioned earlier, is to build full stack applications using AI assistance within the Gotcha framework, so within our main governed framework. This workflow ensures apps are production ready, not just demos. And caveat here, when this thing says production ready, you're definitely still going to have to get in some form of developer to put their stamp of approval on here. Before you try and sell it to someone, I wouldn't just YOLO this and go and sell it. It'll certainly get you a working POC, an amazing POC, but you always want to make sure that if you don't understand what you're doing, get it verified first or convert it to an edit-in workflow that everybody can understand a lot better. Again, check out my video on that. But this framework in itself is almost as important as the main Claude.md framework, because this Atlas framework over here, it governs how we do our builds, and it does it by a process that almost aligns identically with the SDLC framework, which is the software development lifecycle, because it's really important, and that's been around for ages, but it also helps us understand how to architect and build things that don't just crumble in production because we didn't bother baking and testing or something like that. So let's come and have a look at Atlas. The first thing that we do is architect, and that's where we define the problems. Like, who are the users that are going to be using this? What are the success metrics? What is our definition of good? How do we know if this thing's done? Stuff like that. We can see we break it down over here. So the purpose of architect phase is to know exactly what we're building before touching any code. So it's planning, but in-depth planning, so we know the process flow. What problem does this solve? Who is this for? It needs to be specific. Now, if you were going to a client site and you had to plan these things manually by yourself, which obviously you're going to do at some stage in your life, if you're doing in-person discussions with people and things like that, you would jot this down on paper before throwing it into AI. Maybe you'd throw in your transcript if you did an online call, that sort of thing. The point is, a lot of the time you want to understand the user journey. You want to understand what people want out of a system that you're about to build for them. So you would come in here during the architect phase and you would ask them, okay, so what does good look like? Tell me about your user journey. If you're automating a sales team, you might say to them, okay, cool, walk me through your daily activities. And you would sit down and you would audit their entire workflow. This is how we would do that. This is how we define a definition of done, because when we figure out what's not working for them, we figure out problems that we need to solve for them as part of our architecture journey. We do that by understanding what their ideal situation is. Now, to go into this in depth, I have a video not just on context engineering, which you can check on the screen, but I also have a video where we do AI audits of how to audit systems and audit them properly so that you actually understand not just how to make a ton of money for yourself, but also how to solve client problems very accurately and expose it to them so that it shows them their pain and it makes the sale a lot easier for you. Anyway, coming back to this, it forms a part of that because you need to understand who this is for, but then equally, what does success look like for these people? Do they want more leads with less effort? Obviously they do if they're a sales team. But what does that actually mean? Those are just words, and this architect phase helps us map those words into meaning. It helps them bring their vision to life by understanding this is our definition of done, and this is how we're going to get there. But then we need to look at things like, what are the constraints behind this as well? What budget do they have? How much time do they have for this thing? Do they want a full build or do they just want an MVP? How much staff do they have? Things like that. What resources are we going to need in order to achieve this? Do they have the technical capability on site to actually go through this thing? These all get factored into the architecture of system. Because if you build something massively complex for someone and they have absolutely no one to manage it, what are they going to do with it? Are you going to take care of it as a retainer? That's an amazing model, of course, and it's a good selling point for you. But equally, if they don't want that, how would you sell it to them? Lots of things up for discussion on that front. Again, I have a video on that. But the point is, these are the things that we think about during the architecture phase. Because your job as the architect is to make sure that the solution you're about to implement for them is pretty amazing. And this planning phase ties in with the second part of this, which is tracing. And the purpose of this is to design before building. This is where most vibe coders fail because they're not doing these first two phases. They're just opening Telegram and asking this thing to build it a website, which is cool. And they do it in 20 minutes and fine, whatever. But if you want to build something that's actually meaningful for a client, this is the most important two phases, the planning and the designing phase, because this establishes not just how well your AI or this orchestration layer is going to perform, but also how quickly we actually get there. And realistically, during these first two phases, if you are selling things to clients, it is a gold mine because you expose so many problems to them. So if you went in there for one little thing and you're slowly but surely working your way through tracing this entirely new system for them, it uncovers all of these things that they've buried. And that means more money for you. So, if you're just here for the building stuff, cool. But if you're here for the building and because you want to make some money, these things are really important to uncover money. But anyway, this is where we get into the trace step. So we would define our data schema, and this is defining the source of truth before we are building. So you can think of a data schema, just like in this case, its simplest form would be a table. We have users, and inside that users field, we might have ID, email, name, created at, stuff like that. And the important thing about having an understanding of how this all relates up front is it helps us manipulate our system later on. Because if you look at these fields, and you've been building with AI or N8N, you'll notice that these are the things that we're pulling out of the JSON files, like ID and email, to go into other parts of the system to manipulate later on. So the sooner we have an understanding of how a system works, or the system that we're building, the sooner we have an understanding of how we want it built, the better clarity we have later on when we're trying to build the rest of the system. You know, what fields are we going to be using somewhere down the line that ties into this? How are we going to manipulate it later on? It all helps us get to our definition of done a lot better, because it helps us understand what the relationship between all of these fields are. Then you would also have something like an integrations map. So list every external connection. We would have, say, Supabase. The purpose is a database. Authentication type is API key. Is there an MCP? You list all the tools that you're going to be using and how they're going to interact with one another for your specific build. It's really important to have this integrations map because it helps you understand what your costs are going to be. It helps you understand what could go wrong, what kind of latency is going to get introduced as part of having this in your system. All of these things are really important to get up front. And it kind of ties in with the technology stack proposal over here, which ties into what your requirements are that we get from the architect phase. So based on requirements, propose the database, what database is from here, the back end, the front end, any other services that we're going to need. We need to have all of these things mapped out for our clients so that they actually understand the journey that they're about to take on. It's not just about having this cool tool. In a lot of cases, if you're building on AWS or giant infrastructure for clients, they do actually care about cost. You see so many people say on these videos, they just care about the outcomes, bro. But that means they've never served any giant clients at mid-market or enterprise levels, because I can guarantee you a CFO or even a group of people care about how much money you're wasting for a business if your solution is architected like a piece of shit compared to someone who actually understands architecture and how to build a system that is performant and cost effective. Because there's a difference between just wanting an outcome, but also wanting an outcome that is the most efficient outcome because the person you bought it from is actually intelligent and knows what they're talking about. Those are two very different things. And when you have serious buyers at enterprise level or mid-market, they scrutinize an entire list of service vendors. You don't just wander in there and be like, mine's the best. No, there's like 10 of you all fighting over a bid to get into this giant business because they know it's a gold mine. So you need to know your stuff, but also your solution needs to be the best from the perspective of their eyes. And it's not just the CTO you talk to, it's the CFO and a whole bunch of other C-level people that ultimately you're going to speak to in these giant organizations, because they're the ones who write the checks. And even though they don't care about any of this technical stuff, the person in charge of the money wants to know that their money is being used in the most efficient way. But that's a story for another time before we get lost in the weeds. Then we have the edge cases. So we document what could break, and you don't need to be extremely thorough in this. You can't predict everything that would go wrong, but just some basic things up front about what you know from your experience could go wrong. And if you have no experience, don't worry about it. This thing will do some basic troubleshooting for you ahead of time about what could go wrong. It's usually a few simple things like this: API rate limits, auth token expiry, database connection timeouts, pretty basic stuff you can do up front. But once you've designed your system and you have an architectural view of it, you can just chuck that into this and say, okay, cool, we're going to use this, figure out what could go wrong down the line, give me a complete list of that. Again, you don't need to go crazy with this kind of thing, but it's nice to know up front because it helps you down the line when it does come down to troubleshooting and things like that. Cool. So that's trace, and you can see how architect and trace tie in together to form a really clear picture. Then next up is link, and this is where we're going to validate all our connections before building. So as part of this build, the orchestration layer is going to check, do we have an MCP set up for this? Is the API enabled for this? Do we have tokens for that? It's going to go through the entire system plan that we just built, and it's going to check everything is in place, the connections are validated and things like that. It just saves us time down the line so we get everything set up front. You don't want to start building and then it has to build an API while it's building something else. That's just silly. So we get all of that stuff done up front. And then in the assemble phase, we build the actual application based on proper architecture. And because we did such an amazing job up front, we're going to get a much better result down the line. It's not to say we're not going to hit failures. It's not to say that things aren't going to go wrong. It's just to say that we did our best possible effort to provide the right amount of context and information needed in order to do the best first run that we can. That's what we're hoping for here. But we do this in a layered approach, and we take a layered approach because generally when you're speaking to clients or you're trying to get something built really fast, the point of that speed is because they just want to validate their idea. Does this thing work? I don't need to have some crazy website that looks beautiful and does whatever the hell I want it to do if my idea doesn't work in itself, then the website is irrelevant. So the most important part here is not the flashy, colorful pictures. It is the basic functionality. Is the database working? Can we generate leads and send them out through this workflow to go and get to our definition of done? If we can get there, then we know we've met layer 1 because we've already met the basic functionality. Once we hit that, we scale up and up and up, adding functionality, adding complexity, until eventually we get to that pretty little picture right at the end. And it's just like life, just like with a business. You do not start building a business by saying, I want to build a business, I'm going to go and do that. Like, what does that even mean? You break it down, you chunk it step by step, get your domain set up, get your email set up, get your laptop, ask your friends if they need work, stuff like that. The little building blocks that get us where we want to go are how we move from the foundations up to this big scary picture. And it's the same thing when you're trying to build something. You do it in layers. And you can see we do that down here with the gotcha separation. So the front end is what the user sees. We focus on UI components, user interactions, display logics. The back end is what makes it work. The API routes, the business logic, the data validation. Then we have the database layer. That's the source of truth. The schema implementation, migrations, indexes, things like that. We talk about the build order a little bit. So what do you build first? The database schema, then the backend API, and then the front end is last. So we do that last because really, again, we want to test the functionality. We want to get all of the backend stuff in place because the front end is just there to present things to us. And you'll see as we get into this build, again, we're going to start off with the backend, and we'll start off with a pretty shitty front end, to be honest. It's not going to look very pretty, I imagine. But then slowly but surely, I'll add things. I'll change the functionality. I'll probably make a ton of mistakes, go back and fix those. And eventually, at the end of the video, I will give it examples of what I think a beautiful website looks like, or a beautiful front end. And then we'll get it to build that as a final piece of the puzzle. So the output of this phase is a working application with functional database, API endpoints responding, and a UI rendering correctly. That is our basic functionality, and each time we get it to do something, it's going to iterate on this to make it better and better and better, because that's what we want. That is our layered building. And then finally, we have something that is arguably just as important, and that is the stress test phase. A lot of people on YouTube are leaving this stuff out. I don't know why. Probably, again, just because they want to focus on the cool, shiny stuff. But if you're building a system for someone and you have not baked in testing, monitoring, observability, you're setting yourself up for failure. One, because again, you can make a ton of money on that via retainers and such other things. But equally, if you have not tested this thing at load, there's a difference between building in this environment and it working and 100 users running something that you've just built. It is a very different workflow. That is when the edge cases come out. That is when the big problems happen. So you can see down here, we've baked in some functional testing. Does it actually work? All buttons do what they should do. Data saves to a database, data retrieves correctly. Navigation works, error states handled. And this thing will run through that the first time it builds something. It can't run into every edge case, obviously. Like I said, you slowly but surely give it to more people to go and test, run some user simulations, things like that, and that's how you figure out all the problems. So when you're building, you're going to find a ton of errors. You'll run into problems and you'll fix them. But before you try and sell something to someone, make sure you run it through evals and a whole bunch of extensive testing with actual users using your workflow. And I'll cover that in an entirely separate video. It'll take too long in this video and it will go on too long, but you can run in basic testing. So after you've built something, just come down here, despite this being baked in, and just say, run through a workflow to figure out if we have any edge cases that I haven't uncovered from using this. That's one way of doing it. Point being, you want to test your systems. And we're trying to do that the best we can in here. But again, just one thing testing your thing is not the same as multiple users. You need to keep that in mind. So we talk about some integration testing, like with our connections, any edge cases and things like that. User acceptance, so again, that is this what the user actually wanted? So you would then show it to your stakeholders and be like, cool, does this MVP match what you want? We've got the basic functionality working. We think this is what you want. Can you confirm? They run through it, check the user flow, all of that kind of stuff. They're like, yes, let's turn this into a production app. And then we'd go out and you would build it properly, make sure it's secure, make sure it's reliable, do massive tests on it, chuck it in their development environment, test it rigorously, UAT, and then it goes into production. It's a really long process when you're looking at enterprise and mid-market and stuff like that. But for your use case, obviously you don't need to get totally wrapped up in these weeds at the moment if you're just focusing on building. So the output here is a test report with what passed, what failed, and what needs fixing. And we can run this as many times as we want. Now, something to note specifically in this file, because this is mostly just for me to build POCs and run my own business stuff, I leave out the validate layer and the monitor layer. So right now it's just called Atlas and it will build you an amazing app based off of this framework. But if you wanted to build something that's more production grade, you could just ask it, I'm doing a prod build, please follow this over here. And then we'll add these 2 steps. And that's the validate, where we do security input, where we add more security and we have input sanitization and stuff like that. But it will also bake in some monitoring for you. So I have a video on monitoring as well, where we look at observability for our apps and the things that we're running. Again, it's really important. We're not going to go into it in this video because I have a whole video on it already. But if you wanted to bake that into whatever it is that you're building, all you have to do is say this is a prod build, and it will then go and add these 2 layers in there. But again, just to reiterate, there is no software in here. It's all just plain English. You can manipulate this stuff in any way that you want, whatever fits your brain, your mind, how you want your system to work. You can redesign this thing however you want because it's just plain English. Whatever file you use, whether it's Claude MD or this Atlas file, you can make the changes that you want. This is what works for me. This is what I'm currently doing for my use cases and the clients I'm serving and the way my business works. Maybe yours works differently, and that's okay. There's always more than one way to skin a cat. Just because some dude is talking to you on YouTube right now, it doesn't mean I'm the only person you should follow. You should follow multiple people because different perspectives are how we learn and grow and actually make better solutions than someone who's just repeating what the same every person is saying. So the goal of this is to invite you into my thinking and show you my mistakes, and I'll try and talk about as many stories as I can along the way. We're about to get into some shiny things, so thanks for your attention up until now. Let's move on to the next part. Alrighty, finally we're at some shiny stuff. So what we have here is an HTML dashboard that I built with my Claude agent just so that I can get to a definition of done as fast as possible. So what I did is I did some initial research. We looked at TubeSpanner and vidIQ to find out what their best features are that suit me. And then we stripped them out into this HTML format here with a checkbox so that we can ultimately build our definition of done based on the framework that we're using within our Claude code. So if you look over here, our definition of done is to match TubeSpanner Pro functionality for selected features, but personalized to my specific niche. Now, both of these things claim to be able to do that. vidIQ is literally like a potato. I've never gotten anything good out of vidIQ, which is what initially made me think of making this sort of thing. And then I heard about TubeSpanner and I plugged into that, and it was kind of okay, but it seems a bit outdated, and really I don't need to pay for something like that anymore when I have access to all this information and I can build it in a couple of hours, really. So what this thing is going to do is I'm going to go through here and pick all the features that I want specifically for the thing that I'm going to build. Then I can click on Generate Brief, and this is going to write a prompt for my agent. Now, normally I would just speak to Claude Code, and I probably will still give it some voice prompt. But for the most part, this just tells us exactly what I want and how it's going to get there. It also gives it a little bit of context around what tools I've already got available. Because I've already been using YouTube to check my analytics and look at some competitors and stuff like that, I've already pulled out a lot of that information. I've already built an MCP server for my YouTube channel. You can see that in another video on the screen now. And it can just use that stuff that's already in place. There are also some context files that it might be able to use, maybe not, but it gives it guidelines around what context files to actually create in order to get the system built. So enough talking, why don't I click on a few of these things and it will build our context file. We'll jump straight into the agent and get building, and then I'll start talking about some other concepts as we go through this. Cool, so I've selected a whole bunch of these and we'll go through them obviously as we're building all of this. I'm not going to go through them now. And we're going to generate our brief. So it's added everything that I've selected to this, and it's updated our definition of done. So now I can copy this to the clipboard. I'm going to go back into VS Code and we're going to put all of this in and chat to the agent. We're going to build an app similar to TubeSpanner/vidIQ. I want you to do research on those and then have a look at the definition of done template that I'm going to paste below. Some of the things that we need might actually exist in this environment. So as part of your plan, I want you to have a look and see what we can use moving forward. Don't confuse actual data with templates that I have lying around for things to do with context around my ICP and my business. Make sure you're using information that is actually being used right now. So the reason that I gave it that is because I have some files in here that are just templates that I'm using for another video that I'll be filming soon about how you can use this to run your whole business. But for now, we're just going to paste this in here. And I want to make sure that this thing does a pretty good job straight off the bat. So what we've done is we've given it an example of things to go and research online, TubeSpanner. I want you to do research on those online. Yeah, so it's going to go and check all of this out online, figure out what its features are, compare them to the things that I've ticked. It might even find some more context around how these things are implemented. And then it's going to go ahead and write our plan for us. Now, there are a few things that I don't want here. I don't want to assume what kind of files we're going to create. So I'm going to remove this from here, because I want this thing to figure it out on its own. Okay, so we have our overview, we have all the features that I want, and now we're going to let this thing go ahead and do its thinking and its planning based on our Atlas framework and our Gotcha framework. So it's in plan mode, and we're going to hit enter. Now, it's super important to use plan mode because plan mode kind of limits the scope to what it does specifically to planning. If you have it in bypass or edit mode or something like that, it will still plan at first, but it has the right to load tools and do other things to run commands and things like that. So it's not solely doing the planning, and it's much more efficient to set it to plan mode when you're doing something like this. And what we're actually using here, it's not just using Claude Code to go and search things. I have a Perplexity MCP server set up. So any research that I want to do in this environment, it's actually going to go ahead and use Perplexity, which is really cool, so that we can find the latest and best information. I have excellent context now. Let me read a few key existing files to understand the implementation depth. Then I'll create a comprehensive plan. Great news. So it's got its information for both TubeSpanner and vidIQ, checking what already exists in the code base, and then it's going to launch a plan agent to design the implementation approach. Cool, that's great news. Alrighty, this thing is chirping. Which MVP features are essential for your first working version? Full phase 1, definitely. Do you want browser extension integration? No, I don't care about that. Web app only. We're going to do that. Browser extension we can look at later. I'm pretty sure we could pull it off, but for the first phase, we're definitely going to start with a web app and we'll build up from there. So it's still going through plan. It just had to have some more clarifying questions. But the plan is now complete. Alrighty, so this thing thinks it's built us the perfect plan. Build a personalized YouTube optimization suite rivaling TubeSpanner and vidIQ. vidIQ not really hard, Captain Potato. Leveraging existing infrastructure. The key differentiator, everything uses your channel data via YouTube MCP, no subscription limits. Perfect. So the architect layer, the app brief, the problem YouTube creators lack a personalized unlimited tool for optimizing titles, thumbnails, scripts, and content strategy using their own channel data and voice. Now you can use these things in TubeSpanner and vidIQ, at least they advertise that, but it's far better to have everything tied up inside my ecosystem because I can manipulate it however I want, whenever I want, using this agent, and it really doesn't cost anything compared to the subscription fees of those things that arguably are not worth that anymore. So the user me, a YouTube creator building AI automation content, to some degree also consulting, but we'll work on this kind of stuff. So the user decisions, dashboard, create new YouTube dashboard, MVP scope, full phase 1, and the extension, nope, we only want a web app. So then we get into trace part of this where we talk about the data schema. Now, the database schema is super important to have up front because you want to understand how all of this data can be manipulated. If you look at the database schema, it's literally just things like channel name, description, name of the person, comment, things like that. It's all of the fields that we want to use at some point in our user journey or app journey for the thing that we're building. And you can see we also map what type of data it is. So here you see JSON array. It could be text, stuff like that. We listed all here so that we know how to build a system around this to cater for that. And it helps us define the different links when we're going through building the system. So still listing all of our databases. Let's scroll down a bit more. We can see the relationship diagram between all the data. So the creator profile, audience avatars, channel objectives, tracked competitors. Then we have scripts, script versions, calendar entries, so on and so forth. And it shows you an integration map. So YouTube's analytic API shows our channel metrics, demographics, our authentication type. Is MCP available? Is it ready? All of this stuff is ready because I have manipulated this stuff before. You can see we've got OpenAI, Anthropic, SQLite. So it's going to build itself. We can build this locally, which is great. We talk about the technology stack, so the database, the backend, the front end, the styling, the state, the charts. And this is really important. If you're approaching your clients and you're just saying things like Superbase and Vercel because you saw them all on YouTube, that's a bit silly because you might not know that that's actually the thing that you need to match the client's needs. For instance, if you recommend a database to somebody, but they don't have the internal capability to take care of half the tools you're recommending, you're setting them up for failure and yourself, because if they're not going to buy a retainer from you or you cannot maintain this for them because of time or business constraints, they will never buy the solution from you because they can't maintain it. And if you build something so complex that you can't train someone on site with a troubleshooting manual about how to do that, that creates another problem. So you need to think about the right tools for the job whenever you're approaching a client. One size doesn't always fit all, and just because Superbase is amazing doesn't mean it's amazing for that client. Specifically in my case, like I said, I want everything locked into my ecosystem. I would love to use Superbase, but I don't need to. even though I could create some authentication to reach out and have Claude still manipulate it, I don't care, I don't need it. This simple SQLite will work perfectly fine for me. And every time I go to a client, I think about the technology stack in that same sense. Is this going to be easy for them? Is it going to make their life harder? Does it actually suit the thing that they need before we're going to go out and implement this stuff? Then we get into some edge cases. So the YouTube API quota exceeded, that's a really popular thing that can happen. And we give some mitigation strategies, which is also really important so that we don't run into these. And you need to be thinking about these cases when you're building systems for people. If you're interacting with the LinkedIn API or other APIs where accounts can get banned or shut down for a while, you want to have guardrails and limitations in place so that that doesn't happen for your clients. But then there are other things that can happen, like the MCP server could be unavailable and you probably wouldn't know about it because you're not baking observability into your system, which again shows why it's so important. You also need to look at things like OAuth token expiry. That happens all the time. And you need to have something baked into place because the system might be running, you might not be monitoring it, and then it can't do the thing that it needs to do. So anyway, we've catered for some edge cases over here. Then we have the validation checklist. So before building, validate all the connections. So it's going to test our YouTube MCP server is responding. It's going to test our SQLite databases are created with the correct schema. All of those things are in place, our OpenAI API key, things like that. Then we get on down to the assemble part, and this is the build order that it thinks we're going to do based on weeks, but we're obviously going to do it a lot faster than that. So step one is the database layer. That makes sense. We want to create the backend first so that we have a place to store all of the information and the things that we need. Then the fast API backend gets put up, which is apparently going to take 3 to 5 days, but we're going to cut that down to just a few minutes. You can see the structure over here. It's pretty straightforward. Analytics, proxy to YouTube MCP, creator.py, profile, avatars, objectives, so on and so forth. Step 3 is the React dashboard. So this is going to be our front end. You can see it's mapped it all out, how everything's going to work at a high level. Step 4 is the AI integration. So that makes sense that we're doing this lower down in the build because obviously it's more complicated than just doing the scaffolding. Then phase 2 to 4, which is the future. So we'll be adding other features in here. And this is where I said things like we're going to be adding the website to compare it to so that we can get more features and more CSS stuff put in there. Then we're going to do some stress testing. So this thing's going to go ahead and do functional testing alongside me. I'm obviously going to go in the system and I'm going to run through a whole bunch of problems to see what's working. And this is really important when you're building stuff for clients as well. A lot of people, they test it in development only, and like they'll have a small amount of data, let's just say 10 to 100 fields running through an end-to-end workflow or something like that. You really need to test this thing at scale in the client's environment, not in production, in their own development environment, but using their actual data with their actual users running the test. Because this tells you separate things. One, from a user perspective, it tells you if they actually know how to use your system properly. It tells you if the user journey is terrible and there are some things you need to fix on that end. But they also know exactly how to do their job, and you might only have the context that you needed in which to build their system. So by building the system for them and having them run through their exact workflow, they'll find these edge cases that you might not have found, which is why them doing the testing is really important. So you can get this feedback really early. But then secondly, you also want to do this at scale from your perspective, so you can see how the infrastructure that you've set up for them actually handles this stuff. How many errors pop up as a result of these edge cases and things like that. Unless you do extensive testing, you're never really going to know. So you need to start small, and your testing should get larger and larger before eventually you get to production. But I'll cover that in another video in detail, and we'll go through evals and all that stuff. Then we have integration testing, and we have edge case testing, which is some of the stuff I just mentioned. So for the most part, I'm not going to read through any more of this. It's going to work towards our definition of done, and I'm just going to trust so far that this thing has a pretty good idea of what I want. So we're now going to switch to bypass permissions, and I'm going to let this thing go and build its first round. Cool, then we can see what it's doing here. It's updated its to-dos. The first thing is to do the linking. So we're validating all the connections. We're checking the MCPs are working, the APIs, and the environmental variables are set up so that we can log into all the systems and do what we need to do. Now everything should be working. And just a side note on this, I have set all this up. I didn't want to delete it or start a new environment specifically because I want to build this for myself. But if you had to do this for yourself, it would show you exactly how to do it. So don't be like put off thinking this is some complex thing that we didn't cover and you're going to have to set up yourself. It would literally just say, none of this exists. I'm going to set this up for you. You need to do X, Y, Z in order to make this work. And it would give you a step-by-step guide on how to enable a Google API or your YouTube API and stuff like that. And you would just follow that guide, click the links that it gives you, and it's really that easy. You can do it in less than 5 minutes. So don't be turned off by the fact that you might not see that. But here we go, it's testing everything and it's really good. All connections validated. Your channel Mansel Scheffel, Python tools are executable, API keys configured, data directory exists, updating my to-dos. And it's just going to keep working through this thing until it's done it. And when it's done that, I'll come back with something more meaningful. And just while this thing's wrapping up its first round of building, you might be asking yourself, why the hell wouldn't you just build this in Lovable? And you totally could, and normally I would. This makes 1, for great content, but 2, most importantly, again, I want everything in my own ecosystem. So Lovable could easily build this for you. I use that all the time for prototypes. It's really fast. It's really easy for the client to understand how everything works, and it solves the MVP maintenance problem. If they don't have their own environment to build stuff in, you can build that, just set them up a Lovable account, and they can get off to the races. But again, it all comes back to that right tool for the right job. And I'm building this thing specifically for me in here because I want to manipulate it using Claude Code within all of my context folder in here. I mean, this is probably the most valuable part of the system, is having everything about me, my business, my ICP, all of that stuff directly in here so that I can manipulate it as part of any system that I want to. So not just my YouTube channel, but this context like the ICP and some of the stuff that we're gathering for here, it works for LinkedIn. It works for any system that I want to use it for. And once I've built this in here, I can then extend the functionality of the system to chop all of my long form stuff that we build within here into LinkedIn content. And I can add that functionality to this app that we're building to then push stuff out to LinkedIn as well, based off of everything in this ecosystem. And I imagine at some point, yes, I might want to move it across to some cloud-based solution, depending on my needs and things like that. But that would be something I explore once I've done all of this stuff and gotten away with everything that I can from this environment specifically. Okay, so this thing's finished our dashboard, and it's just wrapping up some prompts before we finish off the system for its first round. Alrighty, so this thing is finished, and we can see here the backend has been built with Fast API. Now, I mentioned MCP earlier. I do want my agent to be able to speak to YouTube if I want to query or make some kind of analysis on the fly using MCP. But for the most part, we're going to be using the actual API because it makes far more sense. We can just pull things down as we need them and then store them on our database and stuff like that. And I won't be having AI judgment at the time when that data gets pulled down. So we're not going to use MCP for that because it just causes bloat and a whole bunch of other things that can also go wrong. But there's something that I just want to show you here. Up until recently, there was a massive problem with MCP where it would rip in all the tokens and totally bloat the context. So if we have a look here, you'll see in my environment, I haven't updated to the latest version of Claude yet. So everything in my environment that is a tool, this whole menu of what we can use gets loaded up front. And if you have a look over here, MCP Tools is taking up 57,000 tokens before I've done a single thing. This is a brand new conversation. You can check your token usage here. So this was a huge problem with MCP that a lot of people weren't talking about. And there are a few ways you can solve this problem, one of which Anthropic just made way easier for everybody because they actually baked this functionality into the new version of Claude. So in the update, what it does is if this number gets to 10% or greater, it automatically switches to using a tool selection method. So you wouldn't have this entire menu bloat like you see here. It's just going to go and get the thing that it wants using lazy loading. But then there's something else that you can do if you want to save even more tokens. There's something called code execution, where it offsets this entire thing and it just uses TypeScript to actually run all of the things that we need when we're looking for specific tools. But it's quite a convoluted thing that we're going to get into in a separate video where I cover MCP entirely. I just wanted to show you the importance of MCP bloat because people who don't update Claude or people that are using something else, you might still have this problem. And it also ties into why we're using the API for the API specific stuff. And we're saving MCP when we only want the agent to make judgment or analyze something at a very specific time. Cool. So then our database layer has been built with SQLite. That's exactly what we wanted. And the front end is React and TypeScript. And it made some prompts that we're going to need. So I'm just going to tell this thing to start everything up. Cool. Go ahead and run everything and open my front end for me. It's going to start everything that we want. Obviously, if we want this to persist and keep everything running, we'll look at solutions around making sure this thing is always online. We'll see how that goes while we progress the build. Okay, so straight off the bat, this really isn't that bad. I was expecting way worse. It's pulled in some of my stuff over here. Doesn't have the thumbnails, obviously, so we'll sort all that out. But I think in terms of the layout, it's kind of looking okay. We're definitely going to make it prettier over time. But keep in mind, I haven't given a single prompt about what I want this thing to actually look like. It made all these decisions for me. We'll have to do a lot of testing, but so far it seems to kind of be working. So I think now we're going to enter phase 2. So let's come back to our little thing over here. and just check what we've done. So we've done the features to clone, we've generated our brief, we've compared to tube spanner, we've mapped the data flow, kind of. I want to say yes, we have done that. We're obviously going to need to do some testing, but we'll get into that. That's done. Test YouTube MCP is done. Verify API keys. Yep, we've got all of that working. We've built phase 1. Cool, so obviously I want to add a whole bunch of more stuff to this, but first I want to test the functionality of what we've built. I mean, this is extremely basic, but I want to make sure that this thing is actually being accurate in terms of how it's analyzing my transcripts and things like that. And I want to make sure that this data is all accurate. And historically, we would have forms pre-made before we would go out to clients to figure out what, not just the definition of done, but we would also have our testing written in a giant Word doc. And that would take ages to go through, and we would do our user acceptance testing, send it out to a whole bunch of people. But I'm not going to be doing that right now. I'm just going to get this thing to think about what we need to test. Should have done some of it already, but we're going to figure out if it did that, and if it didn't, it needs to make a plan for testing. And then it's going to run through our first foundational build to figure out what's wrong, what's not working, and what things we can improve on. Cool, so it looks pretty good for a foundational level. Have you done any testing yet? If not, develop a testing plan to make sure that all the functionality at this current level is working the way that we would expect it to. And I'm going to switch it back to plan mode. I'm going to let this thing do its thing. You might not need to use plan mode here, but again, I'm just using it because I want it to be extremely thorough. The better we do it at the beginning, the better output we're going to get later on. I did minimal validation, health check, database creation, but no comprehensive testing. Let me explore what we have and design a proper testing plan. Cool, you go away and do that. One of the things that's painfully obvious to see is that the analytics aren't real. For instance, we don't have views, watch time, subscribers. It's not pulling any of that stuff in, so we need to figure that out. I want to make sure that this is correct. It seems kind of correct, I would think, but we need to verify that. Best posting times. I don't know if it can actually find this data, but we're going to find out. Top performing videos. This is false data. I'm guessing it pulled in mock data because none of this is real. So we're going to figure out why it put in this mock data instead of using the actual data from my channel. And we'll take it from there once it's developed its plan. Alright, and here's its giant plan. It's just written pages and pages of running different types of tests. So that's really handy. But there is something that we need to address, which is what I just spoke about on the other page. So we need to look at the data that you've currently pulled into the system, because what I see in the front end is not actual data from my channel. Some of the analytics fields aren't filling in. So my first question before we begin testing, are we using actual API data from my channel? Once we've established that, then your plan looks good for testing. You're right to call this out. The analytics routes are placeholders. They return mock structures, but don't actually fetch real data from your channel. Okay. The MCP tool exists, but they're not being called from the Fast API backend. So I don't want it to use MCP tools to go and return that data. There's, like I mentioned earlier, there's absolutely no reason we want to get AI to be doing this work when we can just pull from the API directly. There's no real reason for us to use MCP. Can't we just use the YouTube API to pull directly? That will save us a ton of tokens and context. Good call. Direct YouTube APIs are cleaner and more efficient. No MCP overhead, no token costs for data fetching. Let me update the plan to reflect this architecture change. So this is probably going to take a little while. It's going to go and pull in our actual data, fill up our databases, make sure our front end looks good, and then it's going to run through all of our testing. And as it does some cool stuff, we'll have a look at all the various things that it's testing. So we can see here for its testing, it's already done the database layer tests. Otherwise, we wouldn't have had mock data in there. So to some extent, it knows what can be done and what can't be done. And it fixed a bunch of issues when it was initially building the back end. But for the front end, it's developed a new plan. So we have our setup files, and we have some component tests where we're making sure that everything renders correctly. It's applying padding, variants, custom class names, things like that. Then it's going to test our hooks to make sure that our hooks all show correctly. And it's going to do some API client tests as well. And then it should run everything automatically using the scripts that it's developed. There is obviously some manual testing that we're going to need to do because I'm the user, so that forms part of user acceptance testing, and I'll then go in and make sure that the app works the way that I want it to work. That's going to be a whole bunch of back and forth, obviously. Then we have integration testing, where we have done some of this already. And for any edge cases where I'm sure I'll find this during my user acceptance testing, what's actually going on. So let's have a look what this little thing's doing. So we created the API services. Yeah, so that's what we just spoke about. Test YouTube client, get channel summary. We want to make sure that it gets the real data. and it already added the caching layer, which is really good. We want that in place. Wire all analytics routes to YouTube client and update front end to use real data. Sure, so then it's going to remove all of the mock data. Checking our front end again, the main dashboard components to ensure they properly handle the data. Nope, found another problem. So this thing's just going to literally go through its loop over and over again until it solves our problem. That was one of the things that I should have mentioned when we jumped into this build. So as part of our Claude MD over here, this thing obviously has our frameworks that it builds to and all sorts of things like that. But one thing that it's going to do is every time it makes a mistake or it learns from something that it did, it's going to document that in our system so that it never makes that mistake again. And that was how I got the end-to-end thing to work, because it can read the logs of our end-to-end workflows that we build, and based off of those logs, it figures out the mistakes that it makes, and then it documents them so it never does it again when it builds a new workflow. And it's doing the same thing over here. It's literally going to iterate, learn, make a mistake, fix it, document it, and the cycle continues so that we have this self-healing system for whatever it is that we're going to build. And I could literally, done it before when I was building a Docker cluster for a client, and I just left this thing. Like, I went to gym, I did a whole bunch of other stuff, and like 4 hours later, this thing was still just churning, trying to fix all of the problems until eventually it built exactly what I wanted in Docker. So it really can just be like your autonomous engineer. And that's over here, the continuous improvement loop. Every failure strengthens the system. Identify what broke and why, fix the tool script, test until it works reliably, update the goal with new knowledge, next time, automatic success. That's what we're trying to do over there. But then equally, we need to make sure that this thing communicates this to me so it doesn't just guess. And if it doesn't know something or it can't figure something out, it's going to tell me instead of making up capabilities and things like that. So I can give it a nudge if it needs to, and then we can figure out the thing together. Point being is that with this in here, it really saves us a lot of time when we're building something. Alrighty, so this thing has finished. Everything is working. Let's have a look and see if it's telling the truth. The dashboard is now displaying real YouTube channel data, 10,686 views in the last 28 days. So looking pretty good so far. Let me just refresh this. Total views is live, watch time, subscribers is incorrect. Or is this telling me today? I think that's definitely incorrect. I don't like that it's squashed everything here and that there's no pop-up window I can access, so we need to fix that. But this all looks pretty legit. And then we've got our tasks that this thing can do for us just below here. So the next thing that I want to do is obviously address some of these things not working. And I wanted to fix up the front end to make it look just a little bit prettier. Normally this would obviously be something that we look at right at the end, but because everything is so squashed and some things aren't displaying correctly, we need to fix that out, because to me that's still basic stuff that's not working. I noticed one of the things that aren't working properly is my subscriber count. You mentioned 280, but I think I've got somewhere around 792 now. The front end also isn't displaying things properly. Everything looks squashed. Some text is cut off in places. Some of the boxes are too big, and the left-hand side panel is definitely taking up too much space. We need to make this more responsive, and we need to make it look better than it currently does. Just from a functional perspective, we can do colors and animations later on. It's also not displaying any thumbnails. Is there a way that we can get the thumbnail from my YouTube video to show alongside the video data that you pull in? You're right on several points. Let me address these issues. Subscriber count. I was showing net subscribers gained in period, not your total subscriber count. I need to fetch that separately. Layout issues. The sidebar and responsive design need work, and the thumbnails. The API returns URLs, but I need to check if we can get thumbnails. Okay. Update to-dos. Fix subscriber count, fix sidebar width, fix component sizing, and fix thumbnail display in top videos component. You go away and build my life for me. There we go. This thing's still churning along, but we can see some updates over here. So it's now pulled in the thumbnail. It's kind of neatened this out a little bit over here so I can actually see what's going on. These all seem pretty accurate as well, so that's good. Still needs to fix my subscriber count, but again, I don't think this is the total amount. We need to check what this thing is actually trying to pull in here. Traffic sources. Subscribers. That's cool. Thanks for rewatching, guys. All fixes are complete. Here's a summary of the changes. Fixed subscriber count. Added total subs, total videos, total channel views to channel summary. Did you? We'll give it a little refresh now. And then it fixed a bunch of other things as we already saw. So I'm going to refresh this. There we go, 793. Yes, I just got another one since this morning. We're on the road to 1,000. Soon to be 1 million, right? Going to take over the entirety of YouTube. So this is looking much better, obviously just from a functional level. I can now actually see what's going on. And, oh, that's pretty cool. So it takes you to the video if I click on it, which is really handy. But what I'd also like is perhaps something that pops up here so that I can see a more in-depth analytical view of the video itself. I realize I could just do that on YouTube's panel, but as soon as we're in here, that might be nice as well, something we can explore. Let's have a look at the analytics. So this is over the last 28 days, top performing videos. And I suppose this is where I would want to be able to drill down and see more information. So I'm going to make a note of that. And after we get some of these other things ironed out, then I'm going to start looking into the AI stuff like the script writing and all of that. That's probably going to be a much bigger task because obviously we have to understand my voice, we have to understand my writing style, which it can grab from my transcripts, but it's definitely going to be a much bulkier piece of work that I think I would put in phase 2, as opposed to just these quick UI changes or little pop-up boxes that we're going to make. Cool, that's a much better version 1. Now I think what would be really handy is under the analytics section, you have some of my videos in there. It would be great if not only I click on a video, it takes me to YouTube, but equally it opens up a separate pop-up box where I can see the analytics in depth for that video specifically. So if you can pull out as much of YouTube's analytics data for my specific videos as possible, that would really help. Okay, so I'm just going to have a look at this while it is running. Channel name is obviously Mansel Scheffel. Channel handle, I think it's at Mansel Scheffel. Maybe there's a dot, not sure. Business model is consulting, so that's correct. Tone, it's just given me a drop down. Might need to work on that because it can actually mirror my real voice based on my transcripts. So we will get it to do that, and I can get it to auto-populate this as well. That would really help. My audience, let's save the changes here. My audience avatars, so it thinks based on demographics, people are between 30 and 45. Their goals are to automate business and save time. Pain points too technical, but this is obviously inferred to some degree. It has no idea what their real intention is. It's just guessing based off of the type of stuff that they watch on my channel. So that's kind of helpful, but I can feed this thing something much better because I have my exact ICP completely outlined, both from the people that I'm trying to help, like everyday people between the age of 18 and 40, just learn things about AI or starting their first business. And then the other half, which is established businesses, where I'm trying to show them that I can build all of these things for them, or how they can make their business more efficient or do audits and things like that. So I cater for 2 ICPs, and we're going to put that in here when the time comes. The objectives, I think it nailed. We definitely want to have 100K subscribers by December 2026. I think that's realistic as long as I start producing ultra hyper clickbait videos just to lure people in and make something that's completely meaningless and no one will ever sell for 10K because it wouldn't work in the real world. So as long as I make videos like that, I think we can hit this number. But then we need to come to our competitors. I think I have this already in a database somewhere, so it just needs to pull this information in and we should be good to go with that. Then we'll move on to titles afterwards and we'll move on to scripts and things like that. So analytics should be just about done. If I flip back to the screen, here we go. Both servers are running. The video analytics modal feature is now complete. The implementation includes a backend, an API front end, and some front end components. That's cool. So let's have a look and see what this thing's doing. Let me just refresh this. And here's our pop out. So that one takes you directly to YouTube. And if I click on here, you can see we've now got this nice little window over here. Total views 6.3, total likes 199, comments 45. That's pretty awesome. I mean, obviously YouTube stuff is way more in depth. You can view a whole bunch of different screens that I wouldn't have here. But just for the sake of showing this on screen, how easy it is to create something like this. And I'm sure if we dive down even further, we could go deeper down the rabbit hole, but I'm not going to bother doing that. And I always wondered if this was true because every single one of my videos, not a single female watches them. And I know that's not true because people share my stuff on LinkedIn and a lot of them are women. So that's really interesting to understand. From a LinkedIn perspective, it's not just this tool. But I think that thing's now doing what I wanted to do. And again, we can refine later as we go along and figure out what we want. For now, I'm going to get this thing to pull in some information about me that also didn't save my changes earlier, so we need to fix that. Cool, that's working. So next up, we need to look at my channel overall. So my channel handle, you should have somewhere in your data. You should also obviously know my channel name based off of that. And you can use my transcripts to figure out my voice and my style and all of those things. So when we get to scripting or writing my hooks, You can figure out the framework that I use. It's usually just problem solution path, but you can figure that out based on reading a few of my transcripts. And when you do that, you can fill out as much of my creator profile as possible using that data. We can then store it in the backend so that I don't have to fill it in. There's also something that I did notice when I tried to do it manually. When I clicked save changes, it didn't actually save any changes. So just something to think about if I want to update this information in the future. So these are pretty easy things to fix up that we're doing right now. But as this thing starts writing me scripts, it would then write a script and we would have to go in to generate the titles. Those are when we're going to have different systems that actually need my voice and understanding what we've done historically in order to get what we need going forward. So I imagine when we get here, it's going to be a lot more back and forth just so that I can get really precise on whatever it is that I'm doing. And especially when we come down to thumbnails, thumbnails are always a bitch to generate because there are little nuances that it doesn't do correctly. And I'm pretty specific about how I want things to pan out. But I haven't actually looked at the calendar yet. That's pretty cool. So if I click on here, does it do anything? Currently, no. It would be good for our content calendar if I click on here, the actual video that we're going to be posting pops up and tells me about the video. So what day we're planning, at what time, description of the video itself, and everything that we have in the actual YouTube description with the timestamps so that I can see almost like a sneak preview of what this thing's going to look like. That would be pretty cool. And then this is our idea generator. So I can either add them manually, but it would be nice if we could just get AI to do it, which I'm guessing this button over here will do for us. Okay, so this thing's now done. The API is now returning your channel data. Let's find a summary. YouTube API enhancement. Added channel ID, channel name, channel handle to summary response. There's my channel at Mansel Scheffel. Profile page rewrite. Added proper form state management. Wired up the save button. Okay, so it fixed that. Auto-populate with your data, voice and style, casual expert, reluctant guru, anti-hero, narrative style. Catchphrases, let's dive in. Is that a catchphrase? I think it's just a sentence. Here's the thing, the reality is. Banned words, literally amazing, guys, guru, thought leader. I say pretty much most of those things except thought leader. Content pillars, AI automation, agentic workflows, selling AI services, no-code tools, business systems. Yeah, sure, we can add consulting to that as well because that's what I've been doing over the last 12 years now. So that's kind of where everything is built off of my channel from that experience. My ICP tech curious founders wanting, no, not necessarily. Like I said, we're gonna give it a bulletproof ICP very soon, along with the pain points and where everybody's hoping to get to. Business model, hybrid, product and retainer. Yep, pretty much the full stack. Video length, 10 to 20 minutes, 2 times a week. Seems about right. Key features, blah, blah, blah. I don't care about that. Okay, so I'm going to refresh this and see if it actually did the thing. It did not. This thing lied to me. It's just full of lies. So I don't think that's working properly, the creator profile screen, because I still can't see my name there. I can't see my channel handle. I do see bits and pieces of the other things that you mentioned, but you need to make sure that each of those fields is populated. Let me debug this. I'll check what the data is actually being returned and fix the population logic. Found the issue. There's a test profile in the database with fake data. This is overriding the real channel data. Let me delete it and the form will populate correctly. So I think we actually need to go through this and it needs to get rid of all the mock data because it's been happening in various places. Test profile is deleted and replaced with your information. Let me improve the logic to check that the profile matches your current channel. Now refresh the page and everything should be there. It will check if the saved profile matches your actual YouTube channel. Fills missing fields with defaults. Uses YouTube API data for channel name and handle. Cool, let's have a look. Refresh. There we go, Mansel Scheffel, cool, that's all looking good. Again, we need to fix some of the stuff. It's filled in our content pillars, that's really good. And I can just add more, which is really important because this will change over time. Obviously, this is such a growing field. We want to be able to have the ability to change things because this is what's going to be used to help generate our scripts and our titles and all of that stuff. We need to update this. Change the objectives to just 1,000. By March 2026, I think that's easily achievable. Didn't upload our competitors. Cool, that's looking better. You still didn't add the competitors though, so we need to go through I think there's about 4 of them and you need to add them to that field. Found the issue. The badge component doesn't accept on-click. Let me fix that and the other TypeScript errors. Please do. We're nearly there. We're nearly at the start of a new phase. How exciting is that? You can see how easy it is to actually build apps nowadays. I mean, even if you had literally no idea how to do anything, as long as you can speak to this program to tell it your thoughts clearly, it can help you build this. And even if you can't, you can then just tell this thing, I don't know how to articulate what I'm trying to say or build. I need you to help me. Ask me some questions in order to find out how to get me where I want to go. So there are tons of ways you can do this, even if you have absolutely no experience. You got to keep that in mind, that specifically the I don't know how to do this doesn't really exist anymore, because this thing will help you understand exactly how to do the thing that you want to do and then just do it for you. Just don't let it outsource your critical thinking, because that's the one thing that separates you from pretty much everyone else. If you can think critically, especially in domain expertise, you're going to outperform anyone else out there. I can see both issues. Let me fix them. Build successful. The errors are fixed. Let's have a look, see. Create a profile. Nope, still not working. Nope, it still crashes when I load the create a profile page. What a way to really ring home the fact that this thing can do anything for you. But it will fix it, so it's not as anticlimactic as it seems. Build successful. The issue was that the API returns JSON arrays as strings. The code was trying to call something else. Okay, whatever. Let's see if this works. Okay, there we go. Be cool if it had their profile picture and things like that, but I don't really care at this point. We've got basic functionality working. We can view next channel. There we go. So I think we're really nearing the end of phase one. I just want to have a look at the calendar and add some of those things in here. The ideas that I mentioned earlier, where I wanted these to pop up with actual video posts that we might be posting and the descriptions and all of that. But maybe it would be better to do this as part of phase two. Once I've ironed out the script writing and it actually starts generating ideas for me, I could have a workflow where it generates the idea and it plans it for a specific day of the week and it auto adds it to the calendar. So perhaps I'll look at this functionality once I've addressed that. So with that, I think the next thing to focus on is my voice specifically, so that it knows exactly how to generate scripts the way that I want to in the exact framework that I want to for my channel. I think I'm going to speed things up at this point in the video. I'm going to open up a second agent to work on the voice part of things so that I can keep working on the back end and the front end problems while I'm doing that in parallel. So let's come on over to this one and we can say to this one, I've uploaded a file called YouTube ICP in the content folder inside context. I want you to review that. Make sure that it aligns with my YouTube transcripts. If there's anything that I missed in my YouTube ICP, add it to that based on my transcripts. The second task that I want is based on those same YouTube transcripts that you have. I want you to define my structure of my video, my voice, and all of the things that I will need to reproduce videos in that exact same format. When I write scripts, I never write the full script. I just use bullet points, and the script usually follows the problem solution path framework. Identify those key things in my YouTube transcripts, and then write me some new content files that our agent can use in order to use this for our creation system. That was a really long sentence, my God. Okay, so we're going to switch this over to plan mode and just let that thing run away. And then I'm going to come back to this one and look at a few of those things that I wanted to address. So this thing doesn't add an avatar. We're definitely going to need to fix that because I might want to change it over time. So realistically, it should probably be an edit button of here. I don't think I need like more than 3, I would say is max, but I definitely want to be able to both add and edit because I might not really need this, or I might just have one that's really good. So I need to be able to edit and delete and such things. So we're going to come back to this one. Okay, we're still on the creator profile screen. So there are a few things that I want to change. The first one of those is the avatar for my viewers. I cannot currently add a second avatar. When I click that button, it does nothing. So we need to fix that. I also want to have an edit button so I can edit any ones that are existing, and then also a delete button in case I don't need one of them anymore. So I'm not going to bother planning that. I'm just going to let this thing go and run away. Yep, this thing's still planning. Then I'm going to come back here. And yeah, objectives are fine. I can add more, but again, we need to fix that button. Competitors are all there. I can view their channels. My profile looks kind of good. So it's got my ICP here. I'm not sure what the difference between an ICP and an audience avatar is. So I'm going to ask it to clarify the difference between those two things, because these two things are going to obviously define the types of content that we make. which is why I'm building it off of this thing. This thing has my ICP, which is just a text document based on the research that I've done of the people that I want to serve and how I want to help them and things like that. So once this thing is done and we have all of the pieces that I asked this thing to do, we're then going to upload it to our backend database, and I'll get this thing to kind of work through our system towards it. And then we'll be able to run some tests on our script writer to see what it actually outputs. Did it actually do anything for this? No, it didn't. New script. Yeah, so none of this stuff is actually working. It needs to address all of the front end buttons so that we can actually add things. There were a few other things that I wanted to address, one of them being what is the difference between an ICP and an avatar? For instance, you have both of those things in my creator profile. My understanding is that we only need an ICP, or are you referring to them both as the same thing? Secondly, every single button in the creator profile, which you have now just fixed, but then in other menus within our system, I can't add or view things. For instance, under the script screen, I can't add a new script, I can't view scripts, things like that. So can you please do a review of the entire system and make sure all the buttons are working as expected and that we can use them in the way that they're meant to be used? The avatar form includes fields for name, description, age, gender. Yeah, so I mean, that's kind of exactly the same thing as my ICP. It's just adding the goals and the pain points, which my full ICP profile that this thing is busy looking through and building will be able to give us. Interesting that it's reading through there. So my LinkedIn stuff, but we'll see what it comes back with. It's looking at every single file within this content folder. You can see all these yellow ones are the ones that it's touched. So hopefully it's going to read through YouTube ICP, because that was the main one that I told it to. YouTube transcript. There we go. Okay, cool. So yeah, obviously it read it first. So I'm going to get this thing to fix all of the issues with our front end, because that's really bugging me, and I think it's fundamental to obviously getting this thing done. Alrighty, so while this thing's chugging along on figuring out my voice and all of those things, and this thing is fixing our back and front end, we can come and have a look at some cool websites. So this website over here is definitely going to be something that we're going to use to kind of make ours look more pretty. I'm going to get it to analyze this website, figure out what makes it look good, and then we're going to implement some of that onto our site just to make it look a lot better when we're using it. There are lots of ways you could have approached this. For instance, if the end goal was to build a really flashy website for a client or something like that, I wouldn't necessarily have started the build this way. I would have started by giving it examples of what something really beautiful looks like and include all the functionality for the website specifically. But I'm not taking that route. Again, this is just a tool for myself. So really what I care about most is that the functionality works and it does what I want it to do. But again, it all depends on the client that you're working with and the type of build that you're doing, and that's the way that you're going to approach it. But I would always think about these foundational things first. If you're speaking to, say, a group of technical people, they do care to some degree, obviously, that it looks good, but for the most part, they're going to care that whatever you're trying to do is technically feasible. So when you're prototyping, the best thing you can do is the speed to prototype. How quickly can we validate that our thoughts and our ideas and the thing that we actually want to achieve is possible? And that's the whole point of everything that we're doing here. I have no idea if I can build Tube Spanner in vidIQ. I didn't bother checking that. It just figured like it should be possible because the YouTube API is what runs most of those things, and then they went and built a browser extension, and we can probably do all of that. So I'm just guessing that knowledge really, but that's why I want to prototype as fast as possible to see how quickly we can fail before I bother adding all of this flashy stuff on here. But again, if you're building a website, it could be pretty good to come on over to an example website like this and just put it in at the beginning. You can also use things like Dribble, and this just shows you a whole bunch of what all the different designers are doing out there for mobile apps, web apps, and a whole bunch of other design-related things. But we're not going to go that in depth for this. I'm just going to give it a few examples of what I think good looks like. There was another website that I can't remember now. I'll grab that off screen and we're probably going to use that. But for now, we're going to come back here, and this thing has now drawn our plan based on who it thinks I am and who it thinks I'm trying to reach out to. So let's have a look here. YouTube ICP review and content creation system files. 2 tasks based on analyzing 18 YouTube transcripts. Task 1, update YouTube ICP. Files to modify. What does it want to modify here? The current ICP is solid but missing these elements found in transcripts. Career pivots. 0 credibility entry points. If you have no social proof, no portfolio, no clients, you can offer a free audit. Okay, so yeah, that's all true. I wouldn't really care about this. So this thing thinks that my ICP needs to include business people right now, and to some degree it does, but they're not primarily the people that I'm trying to help. So maybe we should split this out into 2 different groups. So definitely going to narrow down the scope on the ICP. Let's see what it wrote about my voice. Create content system files. So yeah, the voice guide, the structure, the templates. So the voice guide, define YouTube specific voice, different from LinkedIn, more conversational, allows longer explanations. Yep, that's true. Reluctant expert persona, conversational but authoritative. Maybe. Tone principles, direct address, uncomfortable truths, experience-based authority, 12 years consulting, blah, blah, blah. Cool, that all looks pretty good. YouTube video structure, the exact 9-part architecture for every video. The hook, agitation, promise, transition. So let's get into it. Foundation, yes, the main content, numbered frameworks. Summary, which is the key takeaways, reality check. Yeah, I think that it's pretty much the same as PSP, which is problem solution path. Very simple framework. Each section includes pattern description, formula templates, direct examples from transcripts, and when to use. So we got some hook formulas there. YouTube script templates, problem solution framework, best for pricing, delivery models, client management. Myth busting. This is one of my favorite types of videos to make, is contrarian, because there's so much bullshit hype online at the moment. Like the title will say one thing, and then when they get to the end of the video, it turns out that it's the exact opposite thing and not true at all, and that drives me mad. So I like to make videos like that. YouTube content themes, master list themes, and topics organized by pillar. Wow, I didn't even ask it for that. That's cool. So yeah, these are all really important things to my ICP, which is you guys, the viewer, hopefully. Pricing, delivery models, operations, how to do things, how to sell, lead gen, things like that. So yes, I think for most of this, it's fine, but I am going to get it to change it just to be one ICP. That mostly looks good, but we should branch out the ICPs into 2 different people then. So instead of having one, we'll have 2. We have one ICP who are the primary viewers. These are the people that I'm trying to help either start a business or grow a business within AI at the moment, become consultants, those sorts of things that I already had in my YouTube ICP file. Then the second half is the business people that I serve who already have established businesses, and they want to know how to become AI native. So those are the 2 things. We should have separate files for those. On the video structures, it all looks pretty good. You mostly seem to just be following the problem solution path. So let's stick with that. Remember not to write full scripts. I just need talking points about specific concepts that we create. Don't worry about the content pillars for now. I'll create those sorts of things later as we need them. Just focus on the ICP and my voice for now. So I wanted to split those out because I don't want to focus on the whole scripting structure and all of that yet. I haven't seen what this one built for our script structure as part of its initial build. It might have built something that suits the system way better. Probably not tailored exactly to me, but I just want to see how that runs before we actually go and build something around that. Okay, so this thing's done. We've got our 2 separate voice guides. So split into 2 files, YouTube ICP, this is the content audience, career pivoters from DevOps, cybersecurity, cloud backgrounds, or even people just starting out, zero credibility segment, free audit, pricing, power factors, fractional CIO aspiration. So these are the things that it wants to add that I didn't have in my initial thing. My initial is pretty robust, so these are just things that it might add. Then for the specific business people, it talks about the companies that we serve, how we help them, and I talk about some of my things like AI audits. You've seen some of those things on my channel, maintenance, observability, all of those things. But, you know, again, it does serve both ICPs, so that's why I make content from that perspective. Create YouTube voice guide. I'm not going to go through that again. We've already seen that. Video structure, we've already seen here. It just breaks it down in more detail. And I think we're good to go. So I'm going to say yes and auto accept and switch this to bypass permissions. I'm going to go back here and see how far this little thing is. Almost done. Fix profile page, add objective, and track competitor buttons. Okay. So it's just about done. Now I need to add the modals for objectives and competitors. Let me add them. I'm going to come back here and see if it's actually done anything yet. Yeah, okay, so it's made some pop-ups. That's just an example. What happens when I click new? Script title, template type. Oh, that's really cool. Status, And I imagine another cool thing that I could do is I can link this directly with Notion. So we're probably going to try and do that as well, maybe, in this video. So I would generally write a script in here. This thing can go ahead and write it for me, and then I would output it into Notion. Or maybe I would have had something existing in Notion, like just a rough idea, and then I could import it in here, and I could say, build me a script. So lots of things we can play with around there. We'll see that later on in the game. I've completed the system-wide button audit and fixed all 17 non-functional buttons across 6 pages. Wow, 17 buttons. Okay, calendar page, fixed all of that stuff. Great. So let's come and have a look and see if everything in the calendar is working. Yeah, so even this, which is the functionality that I wanted to add, is now here. So I think I want to expand this out even more. If you remember, I wanted to add the description and things like that. So we need to be able to connect a video that we already have from a drop down here. And then perhaps we could just, schedule it that way. So if maybe it works under here. No, same thing. So when I click on this, I want my workflow to be select a video from a drop down if it already exists. Otherwise we can create a new one. Let's just call this, I want to see how this works. This should also be a drop down because my content pillars will be filled out over here. Yeah, that didn't create anything. So a few more things that we need to have a look at here. Cool, most of them are working. One thing that I want to understand on the calendar, we should have drop-down menus in there. For instance, the content pillars, once we have all of our pillars defined, we should be able to select them from a drop-down menu. Also, instead of only having the option to add a new video in the sense of creating it entirely new, we should be able to select any existing videos that we've created and place them in that drop-down menu, so that we can select pre-made videos. And I think there was something else that I wanted to check. Yeah. Then to expand this functionality even more, once we add a video that we've already made, and it has its description and timestamps and all of those things that we would expect to have in a YouTube video description, we should have that presented to us in the content calendar. So think about this as a user experience. We click on the calendar entry, we see our video populate the entire screen of that calendar entry, and it shows it to us as it will appear on YouTube with the thumbnail, the title, the description, the timestamps, all of that stuff exactly as we would see it on YouTube. So that we can see in our calendar on that day, this video is going to be posted, it's going to look like this, it's going to have this description, so on and so forth. Think about this for a second and how we can achieve it in our system. And then let's implement it. So maybe we could do plan mode, but we're in build mode, guys. Let's just push ahead. So this thing's now done. It's built all of the things that we need. And I'm actually going to ask it about our content pillars at this point. The only reason I didn't do it off of this is because I don't only want it specifically pulled off of what I've got here based on my YouTube videos, because then it might kind of limit what we've done if I haven't filmed a specific type of video. Can we do some research into content pillars? If you look at my pillars.md file, what is in there? Is it usable for our YouTube thing, or is it exclusive to LinkedIn? Do some research online, see if the people that I'm serving for my ICPs would appreciate different pillars as well. And then we need to implement that. So before I do that, I'm actually just going to open up this file and see what's in here. Yeah, so this is all tailored towards business stuff. It's for Atomic Ops, because mostly from LinkedIn I post towards business people as opposed to the people who are watching on YouTube. So yeah, we need to change that. Research. If I look at my content pillars, what's in there? No, I'm not going to let it waste time thinking about that. We know what's in there. Specifically for the YouTube content ICP, not the business ICP. Deleted my original file, that's okay. I've got it backed up in ClickUp anyway, and we've got them split out now, which is exactly what we want. So let's have a look here. Make this one a little bit bigger. Primary YouTube viewers, AI automation freelancers, indie hackers, and tool builders wanting to reposition as premium consultants earning $25K a month. Hopefully I got that accurate. Step 1, who are they? This shows their age and the description. Starting point segments, 0 credibility, technical expert, and experience, but stuck. Cool, that's pretty good starts. Current situation. What they're sick of. Is this accurate? Project scope too small, high churn, clients treat them like tech labor, always hunting new work, tools are advancing faster than they can keep up. What they're sick of, quick win content with no depth, being lumped in with Fiverr-level executioners, clients vanishing post-build. Their core fears. Ooh. Anybody want to list their core unspoken fears in my comments section so I can help feed the algorithm more? Tell me the things that you would never tell anyone and I'll make some content to try and fix them. What they want: income, positioning, credibility, delivery, and freedom. Don't we all? Okay, so I think for the most part, that's definitely fine. Let's come back and look at these content pillars. Do you want me to create a YouTube content pillars files based on this research? Well, I can't see it. Yeah, so that's focused on LinkedIn. We don't want that. Pillar 1, pricing and value positioning. How to charge premium rates? Sure. Sales and client acquisition, delivery and operations. Yeah. Client retention and expansion, positioning and mindset. Tools, audits, and technical credibility. Yep, that's all good. And then I want one more content pillar, because the best thing to grow your channel is to have some hype clickbait bullshit, but then ground it in some form of intelligence. So I think that's what I'm going to try and do, is I'm going to jump on the hype train, but I'm going to back up any hype that I have with actual real world implementation and things like that. Yes, there's one more content pillar that we need. We need to jump on the hype train in order to grow the channel a lot faster so that we can actually serve people a lot better. So my hype isn't going to be hype based that ends up with no substance. All of the hype needs to be tied to real world relevance and intelligence based on my experience consulting over the last 12 years. So find middle ground there, but also make sure that we understand all of the hype that is taking place in the landscape at the moment so that we can build content around that. Okay, so we're going to do that. And I think one way to really get ahead of this stuff is I've built another workflow where it will do all of my research for me from Twitter, Hacker News, and other places where we gather news as it hits before it gets on YouTube and LinkedIn, so that I can create the hype content before other people do. For instance, the Claude bot thing that's running around everywhere at the moment, that's really good content, but I don't just want to be a guy who makes the exact same content about how this thing can do anything and then presses a nuclear button. So the idea with that would be to find some really cool contrarian use case, or maybe do a video on securing it specifically, something like that. Maybe I will have done it by the time you're watching this video. Point being is, that's the approach I would take. So I do the research really fast, get on the hype train before most of the people can do that, but enter the hype train from a place of intelligence and real world experience. I think that's the best way to kind of keep this channel focused on what I'm trying to do, especially because a lot of you keep saying that you either subscribe because I'm not doing hype or because I ground things in reality. So let's see. Anyway, here we go. All calendar enhancements are complete. Here's a complete summary of what was implemented. Content pillars drop down. That's great. Script selection drop down. YouTube style, modal. We're going to go with modal. When you click on any calendar entry, a full screen preview shows. Cool. I will be the judge of that. Probably nuked it again, yeah. That seems to have nuked our front end again. Whenever I hit refresh, it just loads, but then crashes to a white page. Please inspect. Okay, you go away and do that. Let's come back here. The 7 pillars: pricing and value, sales and acquisition, delivery and operations, retention and expansion, positioning and mindset, tools and technical, and hype with substance. Perfect. Hype topics to track: model releases, agentic self-healing workflows, MCP and tool ecosystem, enterprise adoption, and regulatory developments. Cool, makes sense. And so that's pretty good. I don't want to overcomplicate this thing. I have a tendency to over-engineer things when they really don't need that, so we're not going to be going down that path. Again, we're going to be starting with this, seeing what we get away with, and then if I need to fine-tune something or even remove something, which is generally something that's possible with systems, we'll take that approach. But I'm going to start with this, and I'm going to get this to generate me a sample script based on what it knows. Obviously, we'll tie this into the system later on, but we're just going to get through this now while we're here. Cool. So as an example, can you specifically write me an example script? You have free reign to choose from our content pillars. Make it something exciting, because I'm airing this on a live YouTube demo right now. Write me my script in its framework, and remember that I don't want the full script. I just want my talking points broken down by section. So I probably shouldn't have given it that hint to test if it's actually going to do it the way that I want to. But keep in mind, we haven't actually given this thing a script to write my scripts yet, if that makes sense. So the Python tool will be writing our scripts, and we'll have a prompt injected in that script. So every time we click in our system to write a new script or something like that, it will invoke that tool, which then calls that prompt to write our script. TLDR, inside that prompt is where we will obviously have our framework, and it will reference the examples that we've got here. Let's do it. Going pillar 7, hype, plus pillar 1, pricing, a contrarian take that'll grab attention. Why agentic AI is making you less money. That's interesting. Why? Everyone's losing their minds over agentic AI right now. Self-healing workflows, build in 35 minutes, fire your junior devs. And it's true, you can build a working system in 35 minutes with Claude Code. But here's what nobody's telling you. That same speed is destroying your pricing power. Wow, that's a great angle, because it totally is. But also not really. So there's contrarian to contrarian. Then we got the agitation. You just showed a client demo you built in an afternoon. They're impressed, but now they're thinking, if it only took him a few hours, why is he charging 15K? The tool got faster, your perceived value got slower. That's not entirely true. It can be true in some circles, and some people might be thinking that, especially if you're delivering to a super technical audience. But you've got to remember that these people don't want to spend their own time doing that. Like, I've sold these solutions to literal software development companies because their guys are so wrapped up building software for their end clients. So they bring in consultants and people like that to help augment their own staff and do these things. It also helps to have an outsider's perspective again. So people can audit their own businesses. They can sit there with a little page and say, okay, this process does this and this and this. Oh, we should maybe put AI there. But they're so biased to their own systems and they're so blocked by their own bullshit that they don't know how to do that objectively. And that's where your value as a consultant would come in. So this video isn't entirely accurate because it doesn't actually lower your pricing power. It just increases the speed at which you can get things done, which arguably helps you beat your competition and also increases your price because you're faster than everyone else. So as long as you can maintain that accuracy and sort of, align all those things, you're going to be great. But yeah, anyway, kind of a bit off topic there. So let's get back on point here. The structure is fine. What it's doing here is pretty much how I would frame things. Promise, today I'm going to show you the 3 pricing traps agentic AI creates and the framework I use to charge more in the agentic area. Okay, great. So starting with the problem, and then it's probably going to present the exact same solution that I just spoke about live. So you get 2 videos in one, guys. Point 1, the demo devaluation trap. What is it? Why it happens? How to escape. Point 2, the race to zero trap. Yeah, I mean, this is perfect. Framework of 3 threes. So you can see here, people love threes. So we've got 3 points. And then for each of the 3 points, we have 3 more points. So it's perfect. This would be a pretty good video. I suppose we should, time 12 to 15 minutes. That's also perfect. I don't even need to tell it that. Now, if I wanted to get something even more refined, what I could do is I could get this thing to make the accompanying slide deck. And I definitely think I will do that because it's really going to save me a lot of time. So most of my slides are either made in Gamma or I use Excalidraw for some of the ones that are hand-drawn. And we can automate both of those things. With Gamma, we're going to have to use the API, which means I have to pay more for it, and I'm not so keen on that. With Excalidraw, we don't use the API, we just save them as JSON files. Point being, I won't go into all of that in this video, but I'm definitely going to expand that out potentially in another video because I will automate this entire system. So after it's built the structure, it throws it into Gamma or Excalidraw and then builds me the concept around that, and I can just talk straight off of it. So it's really the full cycle that saves me a ton of time because right now I'm doing this and doing that and it's really just annoying me. I digress. Let's come back to this thing. So build passes. Now if you refresh a page, cool. Let's see. Nope. Nope. Now it doesn't work at all. Now it says that it's not available. Try refreshing the page now. If it crashes, the error boundary should show you the specific error message. Can't reach the page. Yep. So yeah, this thing is good, which means that we provided it a really good definition of done by giving it my actual transcripts, and it broke it down pretty accurately, I must say. We'll need to give it a definition of done for the slide decks and obviously Excalidraw and how all of that stuff works. So it's going to make the video too long if I do all of that now. But we will be expanding that in the future video, and I'll perhaps do another video where I show like version 2 of this app that I built for myself. But for now, we'll just get this basic stuff done and we'll get it to write some scripts within the app and things like that. But first we need to get this running. Change the port. Okay. So let's come on over to the calendar and have a look what's going on here. So it didn't give me that. We got our video type over here, got our idea. But I suppose the reason that it's not showing me anything is because I haven't recorded it. I haven't built anything in here. So that would be our first issue. We need to, yeah, there you go. So it created a Kanban board. And that's really helpful actually, because now I don't have to use Notion at all. I can just use this thing. So maybe that's an even better idea. I could just expand this out further as we go along. Okay, so now comes the fun part. If you look in the content folder, you'll see a whole bunch of YouTube_ files. These are the files that I have used to create my voice and all the other such things that go into creating a YouTube video. You'll see that we also have the ICP broken down there. And we've also got video structure broken down there. So what we need to do now is implement all of this stuff into our system. So for instance, the ICP and the avatar, they need to grab the information from our YouTube ICP content avatar. We need to make sure that you understand the title structure, the hook structure, and the video structure, plus my voice guide. All of those things need to be put in the relevant places within our system, because remember, AI is going to be building all of these things. So then we need to expand on this. For example, when I click new script, I'm not going to add one there myself. I want AI to go away and run this. So we need to think about the best way to do this. Are we going to use a Python call whenever I click on that? You know what, in fact, I'm not actually going to tell this thing how we're going to do it. I'm just going to let it figure it out for itself. We could use initn. We could hook an init node to it. We don't really need to do that. I would think we could probably just do a Python call or something, but I'll let this thing figure it out. So I'm going to take away this over here. You go away. For example, when I click new script, I'm not going to add one myself. I want AI to go away and run this. Same for writing me hooks and all of those such things. I want to try and make this as AI native as possible. We need to develop a plan around this. I imagine the AI will reference everything that we have in our context folder that relates to YouTube specifically. And it will obviously only run when we click those buttons. I'm actually tempted to give it an idea of using initn. So I might just propose a few things. Should I build something on initn for this to run our agents once we click those buttons, or can you build something within our environment to make all of this work once we click those buttons? Now, if I was building this for a client, I might want to think about the future at this point. Like, if we are going to go into the cloud, it might be better to start implementing this stuff because we're leaving the MVP phase and we're starting to get into something more complex. So you want to think about what you're going to be doing next before you go really heavy into adding all of these features into your MVP. But like I said, for this build, we're going to keep as much as we can local as possible. If it was for a smallish client and they just wanted some basic system like this, initn would probably be the way to go if you don't have any development experience yourself or a team of developers to put a stamp of approval on, because that trust is already verified by initn and you know that this thing's going to do exactly what it says on the tin every single time you're doing something. But otherwise, you could easily just find a developer online and pay them X amount of money a day to review your code along with some other AI models that help them do that. I would say that you need to make sure they're from a trusted source. Don't just find some random dude. You could definitely get them for quite a cheap price from various countries. But let's have a look and see what this thing is doing. I wish there was a task I could give this agent now, but I think it's pretty much done its job. I don't want to run multiple agents too much, because if they both start messing with the back or the front end, then we're going to start running into problems down the line if one is editing code and the other one's editing in parallel. And I just don't want to cause any problems. Not suggesting that it would, but I don't want to confuse this video before I finished it. This is fantastic. You have a complete system already built. It just needs to be wired together. Let me design a plan for making this AI native. Cool, you do that. So let's have a look at what it actually looked at. So yeah, it's registered that, hey, we actually have this governing system. But more importantly, it read our files, YouTube video metadata, transcripts, MCP server, thumbnails. Why did it read our GPT? That's another thing. I need to make sure that it's using 5.2 because Gen tends to use 4.0. Alrighty, it's asking me some questions. Which AI provider should we use for generation? Anthropic Claude, recommended. That's cool, it recommends itself. Better at following voice guidelines. Yeah, I agree, let's use that. And I need to make sure that it's using 4.5. For long generation scripts, how should results be delivered? Text appears as it generates. I need to clarify on this. For scripts, I don't build the entire script. I just need talking points. This should already be outlined in the context folder for my YouTube scripts. So we would write them. I would say new script, and then you would just generate that for me. I don't need to read it in real time. I just need you to run away and create that for me so that I can manipulate it or potentially edit it or move it to another system. Point is, as long as the structure is there, that's all I need. We're going to do scripts first, then hooks, then titles. I've written an AI native integration plan to the plan file. The key decision is built-in Python services over N8N for these AI generation features because lower latency, direct calls versus webhook round trips, context files are already local, tools are already in Python. Okay, cool. Yeah, that makes sense. So instead of adding another layer, again, you could do this with the client as opposed to hosting it locally. Like obviously I'm just doing this as a casual environment here. But there are many ways to skin a cat. And in this case, it realized that we don't need to do that, which is great. Key clarification, you want talking point structure, not full prose scripts. This matches your YouTube video structure.md format. Cool, so it recognized that. Let me update the plan with this detail. Please do. AI native integration plan. Built-in versus N8N. Built-in Python services in Fast API, because we're using the Fast API as our backend. So latency is low. Context loading is simple. Streaming is native support. Maintenance, single code base, best for request response APIs. Perfect. When to use N8N instead, scheduled content, calendar reminders, automated. I mean, that's true, but also there are a ton of other reasons why you might want to do that. Anyway, architecture overview, front end, we're still using React. Nothing else changes. We're just expanding our API layer. And then we're going to be coming down to the context layer, which already exists. Context files to inject. So this is really important. Voice guide, reluctant expert goes into all generations. So what it's doing here is it's mapping every single one of these files. It talks about its purpose, and then it's mapping it to a specific button that we have within our system. So we've got script generation gets tied to 9-part video architecture, which is part of this file, so on and so forth. And this is pretty much what you would do if you were architecting the system yourself. You would look at how all of these files, that whatever we build, not just the voice files, but any file within your system, how does it correlate to the functionality of the system that we're building? How is the client going to use it? How does the client experience it? Things like that. You would build this kind of map traditionally. But here, this thing's just doing everything for me, so that's great. The point is, you really shouldn't just outsource your thinking. I'm flying through this, but when you're building something for people, you don't want to outsource your thinking. One, your brain is never going to grow, so you're never going to be able to understand whether the stuff you're building for them is actually the right way to build something. But then two, if you're ever having a conversation with someone about their system and you have no idea how the back end works, that's also problematic because you need to be able to explain to somebody who asks you questions about their own shit whether this is good or not. So keep that in mind whenever you're building something, to actually pay attention to what you're doing and don't just vibe your way through everything, because your brain will just turn into mush. And what's the point of anything if you don't have a brain? Anyway, philosophy rant over. Definition of done. Each feature works as well as tube spanner's equivalent. Output is personalized. Yes, 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 yes. We want all of this stuff. Auto accept. I'm going to switch that to bypass permissions. Alrighty, so I've implemented a few things just while everything's been building in the background. I've added some more content to our content folder over here. So we now have our ICP business client and our content audience aligned as MD files. We have title structures, transcripts, video scripts, and the structure, and pretty much everything we'll ever need for any piece of content. But realistically, this is quite pedantic. I mean, you're not just going to pull this into an agent and say, hey, read all of these files and then write me the perfect thing. That would be probably the most convoluted way to do something that would end up being a mess. Because when you look at context and how these agents talk to one another, or even just a single agent does its job, if you have far too much context in something, it can start to hallucinate or something can get lost in the middle. And while it is a lot better now in 2026, especially with these latest Claude models, there is still room for that to happen. So if we can give this thing really, really good context, like I mentioned at the beginning of this video, we're going to get something far better out of the system. So the best thing that we could possibly give this is, instead of all this other crap in this folder that I'm going to be using for various systems, which is why I harvested it, the best thing to give it would be just an exact example of what I want. And not just one example, 3 examples. So if we come and have a look at my video scripts over here, all I did was I went into Gamma and I grabbed the MD files directly from Gamma. So whenever I write a script, or something like that, I just use bullet points. You'll see here it's a very basic structure. And I put bullet points in, and then I just wing the rest of the video. So all I did is I grabbed those empty files that I've historically used. I put 3 of them into a file, and this is pretty much what you're seeing over here. And the great thing about this is that everything's already broken down in the exact format that I need this thing output in. So that's why it's such a perfect thing to give it, because I'm literally telling this machine that is amazing at pattern detection to detect this pattern and then output me the exact thing. So that should give us a much better output moving forward instead of it having to try and figure out all of this stuff for me. But then I thought about something else. Because we're going to be generating these scripts, there's going to be a lot of context going into the system. So, that can cost money, and it can also add a lot of latency into our system. Now with Anthropic, we can just implement some cache, but the things with cache is that it needs to be pretty much the exact identical fingerprint every time you send a request so that it knows that, hey, this thing belongs to this little cache bucket. We're just going to use this. Instead of paying for the whole context window and taking a whole bunch of time, they'll stash it for you for like an hour in their working memory, and it will just act as this little buffer to get the job done faster. So in the case of our script writing, this works nicely for us if we generate a certain amount of prompts within a specific time frame. So if I come through here and I generate, say, 10 scripts in an hour, I'm going to get these cache hits. So if we have a look over here, cache read input tokens, 8,807. We got a cache hit from that. So we got 90% cost savings on this one because the input tokens ended up being 156, which was only the user prompt sent as part of this. So if we give a working example of this, let's come over to the system. Let's say I clicked on here, I click AI generate, we fill this thing out, and I click generate script. The first time it runs, it's going to send however many tokens, let's just say 8,807, because it is sending our prompt with every single one of these 3 examples. And you can see this is quite long. It's about 1,200 lines. So you can see how it can become a pretty big window, right? But then if in the first 1 hour, I come in here again and I click generate script, we get another one generated. Because it's in the TTL of this cache window that we have, we're not going to get that same 8,807. We're only going to pay for the new stuff, which would be generate me a script that looks like this. But the rest of the prompt still looks the same, like the examples and all of the other stuff. And that's where these savings come from. Now, obviously, it's not going to save you from things like context bloat or hallucinations and things like that. This is purely from a cost perspective and a latency perspective. So it really helps with that. And it's something that you can just get Claude to implement. So we're going to check that it did it properly. I'm going to get it to verify that stuff now. But just before we hop on over to actually testing this, we need to have a look at the prompt framework that we're going to be using for this, because up until now, I've just been letting this thing write its own prompts and do whatever the hell it wants to do, and that might not be the most efficient thing. So what we're going to do is we're going to come on down to our prompt folder over here, hard prompts. Then we'll go to templates, and we're going to look at the universal prompt builder. So this is going to be the MD file that every single prompt our agent builds in any kind of app that we ever build in here. It's going to use this framework because it's tried and tested, and it's one of the most common ones now. And I just updated it to match some 2026 principles. So you can see over here, we've got the role. Everybody knows about the role, the objectives. This is clearly describing the task or outcome that you want the AI to achieve. So we have step 1, 2, 3, 4. We're thinking step by step through the process. Then we have the context sources, and this is really important to have again. So these are going to be these files that we're going to put in here. Specifically for the script writer, it's going to be the video scripts, the 3 examples of good. And remember, this is going to be where most of the lines get filled up because we've got these really long examples, but that's why we set up that cache. And if we're looking at this from a model perspective, I think 2 years ago, if you had something that was like 1,400 lines as a prompt, it would be like, holy shit, you can't do that. That's just too much context for a basic model. But I think now with Sonnet 4.5 and Claude Opus, we can definitely get away with something like that as long as it's very tightly structured. And because we're giving it these exact examples, it's literally just going to be matching patterns. So I think we're going to be able to get away with it quite well. But I digress. Once we've given it these context sources, we then give it the proper instructions. So define the task type, generate an idea, write content, analyze text, whatever it is you want it to do. You clarify any variables, which again, we can inject at runtime whenever we want to. Then we have the constraints. So just like we need a definition of good, we also need to tell the prompt itself exactly what we do not want. Never do this type of thing. Don't ever use these kinds of words in the script. That sort of stuff gets baked into this as well. Uncertainty handling. So if this thing is uncertain about anything, I don't want it to hallucinate. I want it to clarify. Even if that costs me, I don't want it to output crap. We can figure out what kind of patterns it makes as a result of that, and we can sort it out later if it causes anything. Then we have the output format. So we define how the AI should present the results. Let me give it examples. Like, do we want bullet points, tables, step-by-step, whatever? In this case, our output format is going to be this markdown file with the exact structure that we put into the system. And the same thing goes for our example. So in would be my request to write me a script based on X, Y, Z, and the output is going to be the exact thing that I give as an example. So nice and easy for that pattern matching. And then finally, you can end it off with any notes. So again, just to kind of get over that lost in the middle approach that AI can still sometimes get, we want to just reiterate the most important things towards the end of the prompt again. And that's it in a nutshell. You haven't missed much else. I've just been going backwards and forwards with this agent to try and fix up some basic functionality things that I thought I'd cut out of this video because it was just trivial and there was not really any talking points to it. So for now, what we're going to do is I'm going to tell the system that I've given it some concrete examples. I'm also going to tell it that the prompt framework is now updated so it can implement this into the Python script that is, we'll be running this entire show, and we'll take it from there. Okay, so I've updated the universal prompt builder.md. You can find it in hardprompts/templates. This will be used for all of our prompts going forward. I want you to rewrite the prompt for this script writer using this universal prompt builder.md framework. So it's just going to go run away and do that. And then I want to test the system running. And after we've done that, that's going to give me an example of if we're actually hitting this cache. I want to figure out how we can measure this. I imagine that it's pulling this stuff directly from Anthropic servers, so we'll be able to test that. I don't really care that much about cache. I mean, it's really useful, obviously, for cost and things like that. And if you're using Claude in this environment here, it definitely does use it because we can just come and have a look and see that ourselves. If I run can you start the CC usage dashboard that we built and open it up in a browser? So if you don't know what CC usage is, it's just a way that you can view how many tokens you've been using and see a whole bunch of other things from Anthropic's site. But if you can also turn it into a dashboard, and that's what we did here. I literally just said to this thing, hey, set up CC usage and build me a dashboard around it. So we've got that in our environment, and I'm going to boot it up now so we can take a look and see how much cache we're actually using, how many tokens we're using, things like that. So all down here is a summary of the prompt caching. So this is what it thinks it's done. Now it's going through our prompt framework, and the script writer has been rewritten using the Universal Prompt Builder framework. And here we go. So it rewrote our prompt that we would be injecting into the Python script when it runs. But you see, because we got so much bloat in here, because I was trying to be smart at the beginning of this video and organize this system for any type of content system that I would be doing, I was actually pretty silly because I over-engineered too early. So if we come and have a look over here, this thing still thinks that we kind of need to pull out of here and we need to pull some stuff out of there, and we don't want to do that. So I need to now tell this thing that we only want to use YouTube video scripts.md as our source of truth for specifically YouTube scripts. So one of the issues that we have is I see you've been trying to pull my voice and all other things out of various content things that we have in the content folder. But for YouTube scripts specifically, I've given you 3 working examples of perfect scripts written from start till finish. We can just use those as the definition of done because they are exactly what I would put into a system and what I want out of the system. So can you check YouTube_video_scripts.md and integrate that into our script_writer.md to make sure that this is the exact structure that it follows. Otherwise, follow the prompt framework that you just put together. Alrighty, it thinks that it's updated our script correctly. So you're a world-class YouTube scriptwriter who creates engaging, retention-optimized scripts in a reluctant expert voice. Blah, blah, blah. Okay. One thing that I was interested in is the voice examples. So I want to figure out, I'm guessing this is just a variable that it's going to inject in at runtime, and I want to confirm that. So I see in the script_writer.md that you have voice_examples under the context sources and further down in the script. Is this a variable that you're going to be injecting at runtime and then populate it with the 3 actual examples of scripts? Or what is this thing doing? Good question. Let me show you how it actually works right now. There's a disconnect here. Let me explain. Current situation, script writer and script generator. So the MD is the detailed prompt template. It's not being used. The script generator.py has its own simple inline prompt that injects the examples. Okay. Yeah, and that is the disconnect, friend. Looking at lines 126 to 133, the Python code builds a very simple system prompt. I don't want it to do that. So voice examples is being populated with your 3 scripts, which is exactly what we want. but the detailed instructions in scriptwriter.md are being ignored. The current approach relies entirely on the examples to define good. Less instructions, more pattern matching, which is probably good for a system like you. Or we could use the hard prompt, update script generator to load the scriptwriter.md and inject the examples into it, more explicit guidance. Let's try pattern matching first, just so I can see. Let's try the pattern matching option first. Keep it simple. Can you run me an example now, but do it using our chain? So I don't want you to do it. I want you to send the request to the API, run through the tool as if I had just clicked the generate script button in the front end. Also, can you ensure that we are using Claude Sonnet 4.5 via the API? So let's see what this thing does with option 1. And if the output is good, I have no reason to change this thing. I don't need to use my hard prompt that I wrote. We can obviously refine this. And if this was a client system and blah, 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 we would do all of the really good stuff to make sure that this thing was perfect. But again, this is for me. And as long as I can get the same output over and over again, I don't really care how it's done. I just want the result. From a learning perspective, while this thing's busy running around, we can come and have a look in depth at this. This could be more superior simply because of how we've structured our prompt. So if we look at the objective here, we're telling it to write a complete YouTube script that matches the voice structure and energy provided by the examples exactly. So we're giving it really clear instructions here. But then because we're breaking it down step by step, that's a really good way to approach building a prompt for any AI. So we analyze the topics first. What's the core problem? What's the uncomfortable truth that I'm trying to uncover? And again, that's kind of the contrarian approach that I'm trying to take in this thing is everybody's doing this one approach. What is the uncomfortable truth behind doing that or whatever? That's kind of the thing that we're trying to pull out of this. But then step 2 is to choose the structure, match the closest example. So I usually do myth busting, framework teaching, or hidden costs. Those are the 3 contrarian things. There are obviously other things we can do, but generally that's pretty good to go against the grain. Third, write in the voice. Be direct, specific, conversational, like explaining to a smart friend at a bar. That's actually a pretty cool way of explaining it. And then step 4 is to verify against the examples. Does this sound like it came from the same person? So we've given this thing a pretty clear structure on how to achieve its objective in a simple 4-step framework over here. And then we've loaded it with context sources. Now, obviously, step 2 is going to be the thing that this thing suggested where we update this to kind of run in our Python system. So this will change. But over here, it will give those exact concrete examples of the definition of done. And then after we've given it all the context, we give it some instructions, pretty basic ones. Follow the PSP framework, which is problem solution path. We highlight the problem in a bold statement. We show them the solution via a framework or some insights, and then we give them the path that's an actionable step or a whole bunch of steps that they can take to get them where we want to go. And then we just give them a very brief script anatomy. Arguably, we might not even need this because we're giving such concrete examples. So if we did want to try and shorten the prompt, we could get rid of some of this stuff because it can pick it out from the exact example. It can see, hey, this is the hook. But if it didn't do that properly, then obviously it's kind of good to have this in here. So what I like to do when I'm making a prompt is I will start bold and untidy and I will work my way down. I prefer to do that over starting with minimal stuff and building up. It's just because I'm lazy. And I think of it in the same way as writing. Like when I started writing my book, one of the easiest things to do was just to do like a vomit draft where you just throw words on a page in the most casual language as possible. And then you refine and refine and refine. So I guess I take that same approach with this. So we come down here and we look at the voice characteristics, and these are from the examples that we have. Arguably, I could cut this as well because I don't really care about this. It's already going to be able to ascertain what it needs from the examples that I give it. So I'm probably going to cut this stuff, but constraints I will probably keep. Like I said, this is really valuable because we're saying do not use prose paragraphs. I don't want it to write entire things for me. It will be baked into the examples, but I want to make sure that it remembers this. Do not use forbidden words like delve, landscape, unlock, leverage, synergize. These are all corporate buzzwords. I don't want to use them. Do not be motivational or guru-like. I think it made that one up. I definitely want it to be motivational, but equally, I think it made that one up. But, equally, I don't want to be like a guru, so whatever. Do not use vague examples. Yeah, that's true. I always want specifics in here. I don't want it to make up things. So little things like this really add to the way that I want to write scripts and things like that. And then some uncertainty handling. If you're uncertain about any aspect of the task, we already know what that thing does. Tell me about it. And the output format should be an exact mirror of whatever the example is that we give it. So there is arguably a lot that we could actually shred from this prompt once we get into it, but I haven't edited this because I'm pretty sure once I select option 2, after this thing's generated our example, it will go ahead and chop some of this out of there. Found the issue. The generate method is async, but calls the synchronous self-client messages create. This blocks the event loop. Let me fix this by using async anthropic client. Hopefully that was the issue, because this has taken half an hour and it's driving me mad. Now update the API call to use await. Oh my god, it's fixed. The issue was the generate an async method. Okay, fine. So the results, script generation now works through the API chain. Cache created 8,807 tokens for the first call. 147 input plus 200 plus 2,652 output tokens. Generated a 1,676 word script in the expected format. The script generation pipeline is now working. The root cause was the synchronous anthropic client. Fine. Let's have a look at our workflow. If I refresh this, so we now got our test script. Wow, is it the 30th already? The script has no content yet. When I click on the script in the front end, it just says that it's still generating. No, I'm giving it false information there. I'm going to give it the exact thing that I see in there. It says the script has no content yet in the front end, and this is the message that's in there. So while I'm here, now we're just going to be speeding through this thing, guys. So what I really want to do is change the way the front end works. I see right now that you're waiting for me to put in a topic and maybe select a few other things in our menus. But what I'd ideally like to do so that I can get speed to script as fast as possible is that when I click on the AI generate button for a new script, you ideate some ideas based on my ICP's pain points, or based on something that is trending, or based on something that my competitors have done that I want to take a contrarian approach on. After I tick one of those boxes, depending on which option I choose, you ideate a bunch of examples for scripts that I can output for these trends. And then once I select those boxes, then I want you to write the script using my exact examples and place it in there for me. So I think that's going to be a much faster workflow. I'm just going to click plan here again, because this is a big change, but I think it'll be much better to have something like that. Like, this is cool. We can do this kind of thing, fun, whatever. But realistically, I just want ideas, and I want them written as fast as possible. I don't want to come in here and dick around. I appreciate that Tube Spanner and vidIQ take this path where you do this, but equally, I want immediate results. I'm still going to click this. I'm still going to have this title generator separately, because again, if I do write my own thing, I'll come and put it in here. But for the most part, this thing should literally just give me what I want from start to finish, give me a super brief explanation. And anything that I write is going to either be built off of something that you guys desperately need an answer to, or something that is massively trending that I need to get ahead of before anyone else, or something that my competitors have said that I think is complete bullshit and I'm now going to present the real information. Those are the three things that are going to be the fundamentals for any content that I build. And also, I'm going to have to be jumping on the hype bandwagon. So it kind of ties into all three of those things, because I know my competitors will always be on the hype bandwagon, having their own view and how they organize that sort of thing. But mine is going to be kind of intelligence and experience rooted into the hype to make it less vibey and more vibey, but with actual concrete information. So that's my plan, guys. And that's what I'm going to get this little minion to go and implement for me now. Okay, so this thing's written our new plan. It includes most of the stuff from the original plan. It just kind of updates it, and then it reiterates anything that it needs to change or do something like that. So I'm not going to read through the whole thing, obviously. I'm just going to accept this, because at this point, I want to start moving faster to iterate more and more and more mistakes a lot faster, so that I can get exactly where I want to go a lot faster now. We've definitely tested basic functionality. I've tested that the API works. I still haven't seen the prompt output, but at the same time that it's going to fix that, it's going to make the system into the version 2 that I actually want. Now, arguably, you could say that my definition of done was only so good. I had the definition of done for the script that I wanted, but not so much for the data flow. And that's probably true. But realistically, if we're looking at this from the perspective of how I would have done this for myself, this is the first time, one, that I'm building this version of Tube Spanner. So whether I'm building it for me or for a client, this would have been what would have happened the first time, because there are certain things where I would have realized, oh, hey, I don't actually want the system to work this way. I want it to be kind of different and have this button and that one. So seeing these kinds of things is good, because you understand the thought process that goes into behind this. And now the next time that I develop any system like this, it will probably happen again. I will probably be much better at getting to a definition of done in a more specific way for a specific type of system. But realistically, you cannot cater for every single system, every single user journey, every single user experience, all in one go before you've done anything. And that's why at the beginning of this video, I said the most important thing you can do is get to a working prototype as fast as possible. Because once you get there, you can just iterate over and over again. And that's what we did. And I think after we have this, I should probably have the exact version that I want. Then we're going to fix up our prompts. Once we get that done, then I'm just going to put some pretty paint on it, and that's it. But if any of you are still watching at this point and you do like this type of content where I talk through concepts and do this kind of stuff, please let me know, because then I will invest more time into making longer form stuff like this. But if no one's really watching or the stuff isn't interesting to you, then I'm just going to go and do much more shorter videos where I do like a 20-minute or 30-minute build and talk through the concepts at a much higher level. So let me know in the comments below. Another thing you have to take into consideration with this whole planning thing is that I think planning is going to change a lot now because we can iterate way faster than ever before. People are just going to be flying through things now. So normally, let's say that I'm going to a massive government client or something that I've done in the past, and let's say for a cloud migration, we would spend 2 or 3 weeks just defining the plan at a minimum, going through everything, every single system, how everything works, the teams, all the different moving parts that would go into this cloud migration. Just the planning can take weeks, sometimes even months. And then the actual process of doing it in an organization that massive can take years. Like one of my projects was literally 4 years and it still wasn't even finished. So when you look at the time frame of how these things change and how quickly we could build an app like this, I realize it's a very different project. But you have to take into consideration that the whole methodology behind planning now changes. Because we can prototype so fast, that means that we don't need to think as carefully during the planning phase, specifically for a prototype, because you can just prototype so goddamn fast and you can do what I just did and be like, I don't actually like this, so we're going to change it to this, go and make that happen, and then it will go and do that. Yeah, maybe this is a little bit better, or maybe we could do that. Whereas before, I might have sat there and thought about it for a while, like, is this what I really want? I might even wireframe it or draw something on some paper just to look what it would be like before I did it. But now I can just get an actual example and do that, which is way better. So everything is going to change. Everything's going to be moving a lot faster now. And like I said, go-to-market is probably going to be the only important thing now, along with backing up your skills and the things that you're actually able to deliver to clients. Alrighty, allegedly this thing is working now. So it's updated our backend and our front end, and the new flow, click AI generate, see 3 source options, the pains, trending, and competitor. Select a source. The AI generates 5 to 7 topic ideas with hooks and angles. Pick an idea, configure video length, generate full script. I'll be the judge of that. Okay, and this looks pretty good. So we clicked on AI generate script, and the first thing that pops up are these 3 little blocks here. We've got ICP pain points, topics addressing your audience's core struggles, trending topics, and these are the things that my AI news harvester will get. So Hacker News stuff that comes out, Twitter threads that we're following, puts it into a little news digest. Competitor contrarian, so things that my competitors are saying, we talk about the opposite things that they missed, things that they said that are entirely incorrect, stuff like that. And I think I will add one more button very soon, just like massive hype. So it'll be that hype where I add the intelligence behind it, but label it in this weird package. So the package would be like Mr. Beast style, but then the content would be like Naval or Alex Hormozy, like really in-depth stuff based on actual experience. Because I think that's going to be the fastest way to grow, is to do that thing like, I onboarded a client in 2 hours and never have to do it again type of shit that you see everywhere. And then realistically, when you peel the paint off, it's somebody going in there building something cool that's just a quick little automation. But we would make it better, obviously. Anyway, I digress. Let's come down to this thing over here. We're going to take ICP pain points and see what topics it generates, if any. I imagine this thing should be listening. So I want to figure out how this works. It obviously listens for when this button gets clicked. It's probably running away and sending off a process. So ideally we should be monitoring this. Can you check if a process is running now? I just clicked the ideate button and I clicked on ICP pain points. It says generating with a little wheel spinning. Can you describe what is happening on the back end when I click this button? And can we monitor if something's actually happening? Why $500 projects keep you broke and how to charge $15K instead? Cool. You're not undercharging because you lack skills. You're pricing like a technician instead of a consultant. So I think it's literally taking my videos here. The Atom framework, how I turned one-off projects into 12K a month retainers. actually 25K a month retainers. So we need to fix that because it's underselling this framework. You're not an AI freelancer anymore. Here's what you actually are. Okay, so this definitely isn't bad at all. I'm just going to select one of them just to test the actual workflow. We'll take this one. Let's click continue. Selected topic, the Atom framework, video type. Yeah, that's fine. Target 15 minutes additional context. I'm not going to give it any for this one. Let's just generate the script. AI is writing a script. This takes 2 to 3 minutes. Cool. So I still want to ask this question, and I'm going to ask it now to find out if anything is running. In terms of how these buttons are working, the front end calls the post to ideate with our source, so that's pretty cool. And then the back end has the ideation generator, .py, which loads the ICP files from the context, which is YouTube ICP. It builds a prompt with your pain points. It calls Claude Sonnet, passes with a JSON response. Perfect. So that's really simple, and that's exactly what we wanted for this. Yep, that worked perfectly. Next up, I clicked on generate a script. So I just want to make sure that this is working because this has been taking a couple of minutes now. So can you check if a script is actually being generated for my selected output? Successfully. Check your scripts list. Yes, it is working, but it's not really working. Damn, I got so happy there. Okay, so it generated the script, but it also didn't generate the script. This is the only output that was placed in the script folder. And actually, I don't know if this is true. Let me come and have a look at draft. No, okay, so it didn't. Review. The script was generated, cache created, but the content isn't displaying. Let me check where the disconnect is. The full script field has the content. It's all there in the database. The issue is the front end isn't displaying it. Let me check scripts. Found it. Front end checks individual fields, hook, intro, body, blah, 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 but the AI stores everything in full script. Okay, so it's just a front end issue. As long as it's in the back end, that means everything worked and it was stored correctly, which is good news for us because it's a much easier fix. So that process is now working, which is awesome. Fixed. Let's have a look at this. There we go. Hook. I'm going to tell you something that sounds like bullshit until you see the numbers. You don't need more clients. You need the same clients to pay you every month. Most AI consultants are sprinting on the treadmill. Land a project, deliver, get paid, then start hurdling rents. Okay, you're almost good. Almost. Proof pain path. But what I will say, we have markdown. Here's our 3 little lines. This will break it in gamma, which is exactly what I want. The shift, what everyone is doing. The real problem, nobody says this part. Then we talk about the Atom framework, and yeah, I mean, okay, so this is really good. We got audit, purpose, find the expensive problems that are worth paying for every month, not what could AI do for you, not let me show you what's possible. Where are you currently bleeding time or money every single week? This is the phase nobody wants to do. It is consulting, and that's the point. Cool, so this is pretty good. And like this kind of format doesn't really matter to me in terms of, you know, there's no bullet points and stuff like that. Gamma does all of the arranging for me, so I don't care about that. I literally just want, as long as I have neat markdown and these 3 things that separate each slide, it's really good. There is always going to be a little bit of refinement that is done. I never take AI stuff verbatim and just paste it into a system. There's always something that I change just to kind of add that little bit of human touch to it, despite the fact that I wing everything else. But this is definitely something I can work with. Maybe one more thing that I would put in here is to limit it to 20 slides because I don't know how many this is. 15 to 17 minutes, so that's perfect. And then I'm going to go back and make some changes. So new script, no, not new script. I need to get rid of that. AI generate, let's see if competitor works. Nope. Okay, so that's some information to tell it. When I click the generate script from competitor, this is the error message that I get in a pop-up window. My understanding is that we have added competitors. I can see them in one of the menus of the front end, but we also have a whole system around this. So can you check why it's not working? Fine, let's try trending topics. That's probably not working because that hasn't run today. So I'll fix that one next, but this one should be working because everything is set up here. Okay, that's fixed. So now if I come in here and I go AI generate and I click competitor, so now it should be checking what my competitors have done recently, and then it should give me some contrarian approaches to that. But one thing that I just realized, despite this being pretty good, is that we had 2 options to choose. If you remember earlier on, we had option 1 where it would just kind of use what it did where it would kind of just use what it already had, but tailor the prompt a little bit better. And option 2 was to use my exact examples with the exact framework that we laid out in our master prompt. So I'm going to go back and I'm going to get this thing just to do that, because I think I might get something even more refined by taking that approach. I can't find where that message is, but we're just going to go with getting this thing to figure that out for itself. Do you remember earlier in the conversation you gave me 2 options for generating my scripts? Option 1 was to use what we already had in place and make a small tweak, and option 2 was to change it. Do you remember those 2 options that you gave me, or should I find them in our conversation history? Okay, I found the 2 options. The existing script generator with complex context loading, no prompt caching, so that's what we're currently doing. And the refactored one was the voice example based generation, definition of good, prompt caching, raw markdown output. The plan shows option 2 was implemented. Yes, but then we had another option. Okay, so this thing doesn't remember. I need to find. No, there was actually another option, but I see that it's kind of out of your context window now. At least I can't find it in our chat history. But we updated the actual hard prompt, and you said that the script generator.py wasn't using the hard prompt as a template, and we were supposed to bake the examples in there. I asked you the original question because when I clicked on the hard prompt, it had variables inside the hard prompt called voice_examples. And you then mentioned that it wasn't actually using any of that stuff. So can you just analyze this again? Because it might be more efficient for us to use the hard prompt if we tailor it properly with the actual voice examples in there based on the MD files I provided. Alrighty, so at this point in the video, I think it's time to refine our prompts a little bit. Now, in no way is this going to be a masterclass in prompt engineering. We're doing the whole vibe coding thing here, so in the spirit of that, we're going to be vibing our prompts as well, but I'm going to do it with a little bit more intelligence. I will create a separate video entirely on prompt engineering and deep diving into some of the tools that help us achieve proper prompts. But for the most part, you can always speed your way to at least 90% of the way there, much in the way that we've done already. But we're going to have a look at this very briefly. And I'm also going to show you step by step how you can get to a prompt really, really fast with a few tools. So let's check that out first. Our first tool is Prompt Cowboy. Now, I've been working with this tool for over a year now. V2 is coming out soon. I'm part of the beta. The developers have kindly let me into their beta. It's an amazing product, especially with what they're doing in V2. But it's entirely free, so you can come down here and create a free account, and then you get more prompts and stuff like that that you can run. But it's really easy. So in the case of what we've been doing, let's say we wanted a YouTube script writer. You're an expert YouTube script writer. And that's all I would say. And then you can come down here and you can choose the type of prompt that you want. But for the most part, you can just start off with a standard prompt, hit enter, and this thing will go away and it will build out our prompt. And you'll see very soon, it kind of follows a very similar framework to the one that we're using. Situation, task, objective, knowledge, stuff like that. And for the most part, this is a working prompt. That's much better than just this basic one that we started with over here. But then we can improve it more. So just like with context engineering, where we give each phase of the system the correct context that it needs, in prompt engineering, you want to make sure that your prompt has the right amount of information that it needs as well in order to perform its best. And we do that by giving it specific context. So what's the video topic? Obviously, it'd be really helpful to have that type of thing in there. You can just type it in and we'll add it to the prompt. Same for these things. Who's your target audience? Do you have an example scripts? These are all really important things that we actually need within our system. So if you use a tool like this, you're going to get ahead way faster than using anything else for the most part. Love Prompt Cowboy. V2 is going to be amazing, so make sure you check out this thing. Follow the developers, follow what they're learning. I'm not paying for any of this. It's not affiliated. They didn't ask me to do this. I'm doing it because I love their product. Then next up, something that is paid for is Prometheus. So if you are doing prompting and things like that, and you want an interface where you can kind of dive into your prompts to see which part of the prompt is doing a specific thing and what would happen if we remove things. It's basically like having a modular prompt editor that we can figure out the best way to write very specific prompts, see how much they cost, and all of the good things that we need to do with prompt engineering. This is probably the best tool you can use, Prometheus. It is paid for. It's $29 a month. You get a 7-day free trial. I'm not going to go into that now. I'll go into it when we do the actual prompt engineering video. We'll do a whole deep dive of this actual tool. I just want to make you guys aware of it if you are looking for something like that at the moment. But then finally, one little trick that we can do, and we will be doing, is getting another model to review our prompts. So if you started off with step 1 and this thing built out a pretty cool prompt for you, Obviously, you would hopefully have given it just a little bit more context based around whatever it is that you're trying to do. In this case, we're going to pretend that obviously this thing outputs the prompt that we're currently using in our system. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to chuck my prompt that I currently have into here, and I'm going to get this AI model to review our prompt to find any discrepancies in it. Because if you're new to this and you don't really know what to do, having another model review a certain model's output is an amazing way to see different parts of the prompt that it didn't actually cater for the first time round. So we're going to do that now. You're an expert at AI and prompt engineering. I have a prompt that I want you to review, find any discrepancies or things that I haven't thought of that would make this prompt better. I want to focus on speed, reliability, and context without losing any of the value from the prompt. So we come down here, we just paste the prompt in, and I think there'll be a few things that it would find. So before we jump into those, I just want to go over those manually so that we can actually have a look at how to think about these sorts of things before we get AI to critique it, because I have a sneaky suspicion that it's going to say a few things about this. So if you look over here, we're being pretty specific right now. You're a world-class YouTube scriptwriter, think Alex Hormozy, direct, specific, grounded in real experience. All examples should be broken down to Feynman level clarity. That's really good, I think, for a starting point. What a lot of people do, me included obviously sometimes, is you can mix up voices. So for instance, I might say Alex Hormozy meets Ryan Reynolds, and thinking that this thing is then going to be able to just magically pick out how to find the perfect balance between humor and being direct and stuff like that. But realistically what happens is it can confuse the AI into giving you some shitty output instead of something that's really good. So it's always better to have one voice or match your voice, that sort of thing, when you're looking at building a prompt, because a lot of the time you can just confuse it. So that's what I've aimed to do over there. The objective here, write a script that matches the voice structure and energy of the scripts in this example below. Now what I did here off screen is our original prompt was for 3 examples. That's what our whole system is built on. But what I wanted to see is if we could get away with just one example, can we get enough context out of that for the system so that it understands my writing, and therefore we'll save a bunch of tokens and our prompt will be way smaller, obviously faster to run, less latency, all that sort of stuff, because we have less token usage. So I want to see if it can do that. I imagine this thing might critique the 3 versus 1 rule, which I'm actually going to ask it about. But we'll see what we get away with. Then the writing rules. So you are allowed some form of creativity. Don't always choose the contrarian approach. One thing that I think would be good for this is perhaps if we include something like the topics and the framework to use. So obviously in our front end over here, we have the topics and the ICP pain points that we can build off of. But as we go through the system, if you remember, the type of video was one of the options that we could have. So is it a how-to video? Is it a contrarian video? That type of stuff. And it could be good to somehow bake that into this prompt as well. Then the context. The example section contains a complete script, your definition of done. So this is pretty straightforward. I think there are some things we could expand on, but let's see what the AI says. This is pretty good. We don't need to elaborate on that. Constraints, we might need to elaborate on this a little bit more, specifically to get a better gamma slide deck format. I want it to give me information and bullet points, not entire scripts. We'll see how this thing critiques it though. Output format is pretty straightforward. Then we've got our entire example in here. So again, we don't have to have it in here. We can use those variables and we just might as well do that. But for now, I'm just going to give this thing a little bit more context. Generally in my system that it's a part of, which is a content creation system for YouTube, it's using 3 examples that are injected in at runtime. For your specific use case right now, I've only used 1 example, so you can see what they look like. Is it better to use 3 examples or 1 example? I was also thinking of implementing a topic to give it more context. So right now, I think one of the problems will be that this thing keeps outputting contrarian-only example scripts. Because it sees my example as contrarian, it thinks that's all we can do. But realistically, we want to target specific people. So we can use the ICP as one of the triggers, and then the topic. So we could have how-to, or we could have contrarian, whatever, different approaches. Please criticize this prompt, and I'll chuck it back into Claude Code to review your criticism. So that was overly long, probably. But because I'm talking out loud, sometimes my brain just wanders. Whoop, and I just realized I was running the fast model. So I don't want to run the fast model. I want to use the thinking model. So I'm just going to recopy my prompt in, just in case we get an even better output, because this thing's thought for a second. This is high energy, high utility prompt, blah, 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 overfitting. You see, and we get a much better critique over here. It addressed all of my questions instead of just that fast approach. So that was my bad on the first run. Anyway, 3 examples is better than 1. That is the debate. 1 example is a mirror. The AI will copy the topic, the tone, and the specific anger level of that one script. 3 examples are a map. By providing 3 example scripts, 1 contrarian, 1 how-to, and 1 case study, the AI learns to separate the voice. And that's exactly what we did the first time around. So we got it right. Implementing the context triad. Topic, ICP, angle. You need to move your specific variables to the very top of the prompt. LLMs prioritize information found at the beginning and end of the context window. I think we mentioned that earlier in the video. I can't remember. Maybe that was another video. Anyway, I digress. I recommend adding an input parameters block. Topic, ICP, angle, cool. We're definitely going to do that. We've already got it in the front end. I added that off screen because I predicted that we would want to do something like this. Cool, we're definitely going to be adding that because that makes complete sense. The PSP arc versus example headers. This is a slight discrepancy between your PSP arc instructions and your example headers. In the instructions, you say problem solution path. In the example, you use hook, shift, myth, how it works. So yeah, I can see how that can be confusing. The fix tell AI that problem equals hook shift, solution is myths technical. Okay, cool. So now all I'm going to do is I'm just going to copy this conversation and I'm going to paste it into our Claude environment. And I'm going to get this thing to review its work, see what it agrees with, and then see how I can map it into our system. Now there's a caveat here. Obviously, if we were doing this for clients, we would be doing this probably this fast if we were prototyping. But then when it comes down to building a real system, there are a lot of things that you need to take into consideration here. The first one being, when you're doing this kind of thing, you're building for yourself right now, we're prototyping. You'll do the same thing for your clients. But then when it comes down to your clients actually implementing this product, you need to understand you're going to be doing testing, rigorous testing, user acceptance testing, all the different kinds. And as part of that, you're not just going to run it on one piece of data or even 10 examples. You're going to be building this on hundreds or, depending on the size of the system, even thousands of iterations, evals, stuff like that, to make sure that you're getting the output that you want every single time. The more users that test this, the more problems you're going to run into, which is good news for your system because that means you'll cater for those things before we hit production, and that's exactly what we want. That's why we take this approach. This prototyping phase is to get things done as fast as possible. Then when we get into better builds and better testing, that layered stuff scales up just like everything else, and we get into a system that's far more reliable because we've tested it at scale. So that was just a caveat that I needed to put in because I don't want people to think that I'm just vibing this crap and then I'm going to go and sell it to clients. That's ridiculous. You can certainly get most of the way there, but again, you want that stamp of approval. You want to make sure that you've got someone in who knows what they're doing before you try and sell someone a SaaS or a product and something like that. It's fine for your own business as long as you understand what you're getting into. But then the second part of this whole prompt engineering thing that we will cover in another video is that we would be vibing all of the stuff and getting as close as we can to perfection with the vibes. But then equally, I would throw it into one of those other programs like Prometheus and figure out exactly what we can get away with. And that's where I would kind of use AI more as my backhanded co-pilot instead of driving most of this. And I would go through each one of these sections. I would go through objective and writing rules and context and things like that. And I would break them down line by line to figure out if we actually need this. What can we get away without having it there to save on tokens and therefore increase our speed, reduce costs and things like that. It's all for another video. I don't want to get lost in the weeds. Right now we're sticking to the whole vibe thing and we're going to see what this thing thinks of Gemini's critique. Because even if we were doing the proper way, I would still get AI to critique. I think it's an amazing critic. It's just pattern matching, and if it finds something that doesn't really work in the way that it should, or it thinks something is misaligned, it's going to tell you far faster than someone who potentially doesn't know everything about AI or something specific about AI. This is an excellent analysis. The key insight is overfitting. Your single contrarian example is teaching the model that contrarianism is the voice when it's actually just one angle. Okay, so we're not going to be doing the one thing. We're going to stick with the 3 examples that we started with the first time we did this. I see several issues. The Gemini feedback is spot on. Here's a situation. Hard prompt has 1 full contrarian example. Yeah, so this is what I changed off screen just to see if we could get away with anything. Voice examples from database also get appended. Did you take into account the topic and the angle information that was presented to you from Gemini? We should already have that in the system because we just implemented a few chats up. Is there a way that we can just use the examples as a framework, because PSP is the same framework regardless of the writing, and not just bake in an aspect of how to be creative or adapt to the angle on selection from the front end? If that sentence makes sense. Point being is what I'm trying to do here is I want to see if there's a way by using the toggles on our front end, if by selecting that I can just on the fly get this thing to follow the logic and structure of our script that we have. And let's see what it comes back with. You're right, we already have angle selection working from the front end. The hard prompt is over-explaining what's already being passed dynamically. So what should be static? The voice pattern matching, the PSP structural framework, and the output format. What's already dynamic? The topic, the angle instruction, and the video type and length. Let me strip the hard prompt down to just voice and structure. Well, hopefully this thing didn't YOLO its way to doing something that I didn't want. Role, voice, structure, output format, constraints, max 4 sub-bullets per main bullet, specific numbers. Yeah, so it chomped my prompt down quite a lot. I don't know if I wanted it to do that, but let's have a look at what it outputs. Don't you think that you chopped off too much? I liked the original structure of my prompt. You seem to have cut off the objective even, so this thing doesn't really know what it's doing. We need to not strip all of that out. It needs to align more with my original framework, just with these additions that we've made. Think about this before you act. And I probably should have been more specific there, and equally, I probably shouldn't have just let this thing bypass permissions, because then obviously it wouldn't have gone and done this. So it's going to go ahead and fix all this up, hopefully, because I want the objective in here. We don't even have the voice examples. For some reason, it seems to have stripped that out. You also stripped out the voice examples. There we go, wait. I stripped out too much. Let me restore your original structure while incorporating the fixes. Okay, and it thinks that it's done that now, so it put back most of our stuff. We can see here that it just put in a clause to follow the examples, but then based on the angle, you can kind of pivot. The examples may be contrarian, but that doesn't mean every script should be. Cool, so that's what we want. Now I'm going to go ahead and test this thing. I don't think it's going to be perfect yet, maybe one more iteration, and then we're going to move on to the website. So let's go AI generate. Let's choose our ICP pain points and see if this thing maps correctly. Now, if we wanted this system to work even better, something that I think we could do is somewhere in here, we could obviously have the topic that we're about to select, but I think it might be baked in the Python script. Just can't remember, I've been recording for like 8 hours. But we could have the topic and then it could match the angle, and we could give this thing a little bit more context about who it is writing for. We might get an even better example then. But for the most part, I think we're going to be wrapping this up very soon just on this front. So something that is not contrarian, stop. Let's do this. This sounds like a how-to one, from 0 clients to 10K months. The case study no one talks about. Kind of contrarian, but it's also can be how-to, I think. So we're going to select how-to, and it's definitely going to be a framework. So we're going to generate this and see what this thing comes back with based off of our original script. And while that thing is writing, you know, it comes down to the importance again of that whole context thing. So we could be very specific in this. And for a lot of the things that you do, you want to be as specific as you can. So for instance, with our script length and things like that, where I talk about, you know, don't write full sentences and things like that, you could elaborate on that even more and say like, what does that actually mean? And then you could have points like, don't make the script longer than X number of words. But then equally, what you could do is you could take the average number of words from one of your completed slide decks that you like, and you could say each slide should equal whatever the number of words on your definition of good slide is. And we could bake that directly in here. That's something I could do if I cared enough. And probably if I was doing it for a client, I would most certainly take that approach. Be as specific as possible within these things over here. Just like we're being with some of these, but equally with our constraints here, we're saying don't saturate slides with noise. What does that mean? Max 4 sub-bullets per main bullet. You see, that's more specific and that's a good thing. But then equally, we could put in that thing here for things like, say, don't use 500 words. Or you could have another section describing the slides specifically and what you do want on each slide just before you give an example of that. So there are lots of different things that we can do. Again, for this case where I'm just vibing here, I don't really care that much. I don't want to keep you guys here forever. I just made some of these mistakes and did some of these things so that I could show you different angles of things and how we approach them, so that it doesn't all look like the glitz and glamour that you see on YouTube where one shot, everything done. I don't believe that's the approach, and I think there are very few people who are one-shotting a 20K sale right now that actually lasts over a lifetime and keeps their business afloat. So hopefully you see the value in some of the things that I'm saying in here. Of course, there are many different ways to handle any problem, and I'm not suggesting mine is the only way to do it, but it's certainly one of the ways to do it. And if I was doing it for clients, I'm definitely going to be doing things properly. So our script is now generated, and we can see it over here. Let's take a look at what it looks like. Hook, if you have 0 clients, 0 credibility, and 0 case studies, you're not losing anything by doing free work. But here's what everyone gets wrong about free work. They do it backwards. They lead with desperation instead of strategy. They pitch their services hoping someone will say yes, blah, blah, blah. That's good. A bit lengthy, so obviously we could fine-tune this to make it shorter. And just for reference, this part I put in the teleprompter. So because I need to be super accurate with what I say to attract people to the video, I don't wing the video, but the rest is winged, which is why I don't care about the rest of the structure. So it looks like it could be the right size, but equally in this little screen over here, it looks like it might actually be too long in some places for slides. But the structure looks pretty good. So we've got step 1, target selection, not every business. And you can see this is a how-to now because we're doing step 1, step 2, step 3. But yeah, I think this could work. In Gamma, you have to remember in Gamma, it's going to manipulate the way that things look and stuff like that. So if I copy this now, we can come and test this and see what it actually looks like in Gamma. So I think I'm going to have a copy button. Now, the thing with Gamma is that it has an API, but the API comes in the higher price tier, which I don't want to pay for because there's absolutely no reason for me. When you're making slides, there are tons of ways you can do it. We could get Google to make us slides with Gemini and our Claude Code environment. But if you watched my context engineering video, that entire video was made with HTML that our Claude Code environment just built for me after I'd actually built out that framework. I just said, hey, turn this into an animated HTML slide deck, and went off and did it. So there are tons of ways to do that. And realistically, like I said, when I'm making videos, I don't just want some AI-generated crap. I do come in afterwards and put in a little bit of my own personality or bullet points that it didn't think about when it generated for me. This is just my shell. So I have to manually come in here anyway to some degree. I want to automate 90% of it. The other 10%, I can just easily come over to Gamma and copy and paste it in like I'm going to do now. And after that, I can then do any editing and things. So if we paste this in, we can come down here and we can see how it slices it up. So presentation is there, but now we're going to preserve the exact text. I could get this to summarize it or make it shorter for the slides, but I just want to see firstly how many slides this thing made, and then I want to see how long each one is. Why could you not import this file? Okay, so you're limited to 20 cards and this thing made 25. Okay, that's not bad. I don't need a CTA, so I can actually remove that. And there'll be other things that we'll tweak. I don't need a heading in my slide deck because no one ever sees that. This goes in the teleprompter, so I don't need that. This is pretty good, so I'll keep that. Anyway, I'm just going to delete these last few so that I can generate the slide and see what this thing outputs, because this obviously helps me establish my definition of done from this prompt specifically for the slide. Gamma is pretty good at manipulating all of this text, so even though it looks like a lot, we might be able to get away with it. So I'm just generating based off of a template that I've used before for my style. I'm sure you've seen it in my other videos. And this thing's getting off. So one of the great things about presenting on YouTube is that because it's not a corporate slide deck, it doesn't matter if it's a little bit long. For instance, if I use the spotlight effect, this is pretty easy to navigate on YouTube. If I put a line in here, it'll be even better. But if this is a common theme and every one of them starts to look this long, then what I'm going to do is I'm going to bake in a rule in my prompt and I'm going to say, okay, for some of them, it's okay to be a little bit long, maybe some of them less. So we alternate the patterns. It's better for retention. It's better for the way that your brain perceives the information. But you can see here, this isn't terrible. It is a little bit text heavy. So we're going to figure out why it used so much text. Like these ones are good. This one's good. This is good. It was just the first ones that are way too text heavy. So I'm going to come over here. Cool, so that seems to have given me a nice script. One thing I would say is that some of the slides are overly long. So can we analyze the 3 examples that I have and find out the average number of words on those? We should probably bake in something in our prompt that gives the average number of words to use per slide so that we don't oversaturate it. Cool, so that's going to go away and do what we wanted to do there. And I think that's probably the last piece of work that I'm going to be doing on this prompt. Again, for the most part, this is pretty good. Most people do free work like this. I'll build your website for free. Let me run your Facebook ads for free. What's wrong with this approach? You're positioning yourself as someone who does the work, not someone who solves business problems. I don't need such a long sentence, stuff like that. But most of this is pretty good. And once this thing is analyzed and looked at the text of how we actually write things, here we go. Slide length, 50 to 100 words per section. Average from the examples is 72 words. Hard max 150. If a section exceeds this, split it into 2 slides. Cool. So that's added it to our prompt. I imagine it's under the constraints section. There we go. Perfect. So that's in there now. We'll generate another slide just to check that the how-to framework is working. And then we're going to jump across to the website. So AI generate. Okay, so while this thing's chugging away, let's go and do some things to this website to make it look even better. Now, I will be refining the system because I think I'm definitely going to be using it moving forward just to give me an overview. YouTube's analytics themselves are amazing, but once I refine this and I actually get the how-to framework perfected, I think I might move it somewhere else and I'll make some other changes. Perhaps later on down the line, I'll make another video of all the things that I changed to show you the complete final 100% perfectly working product type of thing. But for now, this whole video has just been about vibe coding and whatever it is that we've learned along the way. So the next thing that we're going to do is now look at the front end, because this could be looking way better. And obviously, depending on the type of website that we were building, we would have approached this thing entirely differently. This is more of a web app than a website. So two different things. We don't have a hero landing page and stuff like that. And if it was an external facing product, we would obviously need one, stuff like that. Anyway, I'm going to be focusing on not just the user experience, but also what it looks like in here so that it really looks awesome when I'm browsing through all of these tabs and things like that. So the first thing that we're going to do is, if I had no idea what I was doing and I was just starting to build the front end or something like that, I would ask this thing to do research into what the best, sexiest, whatever words you want to use to figure out for the best looking front end, the most performant front end, adding animations and things like that. This thing could go and do that research for me. And I guarantee you one of the things are going to be to either give it an example website or give it some screenshots of what a landing page might look like so that it can figure things out from that perspective. Basically feeding it any examples of what you want. But then equally, you could get it to do some deeper research and you can get it to figure out what the latest frameworks are. So I did that off screen and 4 of them were these ones. So we're just going to ask it if it knows about these. I did some research on making amazing front ends. Are we using these 4 things on our website? If not, does it make sense to implement them? But then also, can you do some research into how we can make our web app look insanely beautiful to use? I'm filming this on YouTube right now and there are hundreds of millions of people watching you. So make this the best example you ever could for our front end. That's my life goal, guys, to get hundreds of millions of people watching my videos. Let's have a look at this. Cool. So yes, this is already looking way shorter, which is great. That's perfect. So one problem that I might see with this, again, another problem, is that we'll need another constraint saying it needs to fit into 20 slides. I don't know if this is 20 slides. I'm not going to bother generating another one. But it seems to have fixed the slide size themselves. So that's good news. So it's looking through all the files that are created to figure out what is missing. I expect it's doing a gap analysis from what it did the first time we set this up. We did some iteration earlier on this, but now we're really going to take it to the next level. And that all ties in with the philosophy that we've been doing throughout this. You know, you start off with the basic functionality stuff and you go all the way through there. There are some times where you can just kind of one-shot a prototype for sure. That's definitely a way of doing it. And I'm not suggesting you spend 8 hours vibing your way through something just to get where we are now. That's a little bit silly. I did it for the specific purpose of trying to teach you things and thinking and showing you that it's okay to fail and whatever. But if you can get this done in less than an hour, you're going to be able to beat your competitors. So having a framework like Atlas is super important because it can help you do that as fast as possible. So based on my research into making your dashboard visually impressive, here's my analysis. Current stack versus proposed technologies. You have React 19, Vite, Tailwind, CSS, Radix. Okay. 3.js, best for 3D marketing sites and games. Overkill. Alrighty. GSAP, complex timeline. Heavy frame emotion is more React Native. Linus scroll, dashboards are panel based, not scroll driven. Shader toy, visual effects and backgrounds, GPU intensive. The reality check. These technologies are designed for marketing sites where the goal is wow on first visit. Right. And that's what I mentioned up front, is that there's a difference between a web app and a website. And that's exactly why we're not going to be implementing these things on our website, because it makes no sense from a perspective of me using this thing. But hopefully it's still going to go away and figure out some way to make this thing look a lot prettier for us. And then we can remove any of the redundant things that we're not going to be using anymore. I'll probably do another video at some point where we focus on building a website from scratch using something like this and getting to an amazing looking website as fast as possible instead of taking this 8-hour thing. And perhaps I'll even do another vibe coding vid where I just do all of this stuff, but I do it as fast as possible by one-shotting something that's really amazing from the beginning and see if we can get it done in under an hour to a prototype. And here we go. It started to chug along, doing some updates and some upgrades. Realistically, if I give this thing an image, it would have obviously had a definition of done much sooner, but I haven't done that because we just want to see how this thing copes by getting it to do a little bit of research and then putting in some basic updates. Build successful. Here's what we've implemented. A whole bunch of things. Okay. So I want to run the dashboard and see. I don't care that you didn't do those things. Just show me my output. Okay, so from a visual perspective, it mostly looks exactly the same, but we can see here that these little animations are a lot smoother and basic functionality is just a little bit better. These shadows are deeper. I don't know if you can see it from watching whatever screen you're on now, but this all looks a little bit different. Just subtle things that make the user journey a little bit better when someone's scrolling over something. But now I want to make it look prettier because arguably this thing still looks like a dog's breakfast. And I think at this point, we're just going to feed it a definition of done. So obviously, if I was doing this for a client or a specific video just on building a website or web app, I would have done this right at the beginning instead of going this long-handed way of showing you all of these things. But for the most part, we're just going to come over to Dribble and we're going to grab this picture over here. I'm just going to copy this image and I'm going to paste it into our chat window and I'm going to say, take a look at this web app picture, analyze it. This is the look that I'm going for. Study it in depth and find out everything that you can about it. I've also pasted a link into the description below that you can read as well if there's any more information in there that's helpful. And you can do this for various websites that have examples and stuff like that. You can just paste in what you think a definition of good is, and we'll go and figure it out. We'll do an analysis of that. So I'm going to flip this to plan mode just in case it gets us something better. Because it's going to analyze this picture, it will have a look at the website and see if it can pull anything else out there. I don't think there's much more information on the actual website. We can come and have a look down here. I think they just talk a little bit about the colors. Might be useful for it, but it might go and do some other web search around this, in which case it might find more information from that. But even from this picture alone, it should have a pretty clear view of what I want now. Something that's more visual and something that's not all cramped and shitty like the one that we currently have in place. But if we were looking at the perspective of doing this for a client, I would say the first thing that you should do to get to your definition of done is to go to a website like Dribble or one of your favorite websites and just take a whole series of screenshots like this, put it in landing page, services section, about page, whatever, label them, get it to analyze it perfectly and figure out what it sees in the image, and then just paste in a link to the website as well. Give it as much of that context as you can up front. Because again, I can describe the color blue. I can talk about, I want this thing to be round and modern and all of that shit. But what does that actually mean? The AI doesn't know what that means specifically. With examples, we are being specific. We are showing it what we want. And that's what we do out throughout this whole thing. So now, based on this thing analyzing, we should get a much better result. And we can see here that it's now done its analysis. The color palette, background colors, main background, soft lavender, things like that, the accent colors, the text colors, the typography, layout characteristics. So it figures out the pixel width, which is interesting. Logo at the top, main content, generous padding, cards inconsistent. So hopefully it's now got this definition that it needs so that it can get us where we want to go as fast as possible. It's having a look at where we are now, and then it's telling us where we want to go to. It's a different design, obviously. So by the end of it, it's probably going to go away and do this work for a little bit. And hopefully we will have a redesigned website that actually looks good and meets what we wanted all along. I'm just going to accept this because I've kind of read it. It's updated our entire plan again. So it's always going to use the original plan that we started right at the beginning. And it just adds things as it goes along. It does this so that it doesn't lose track of what it's doing, but also so that we document the things correctly while we're going through it. And again, that's just the power of Atlas and what we're doing within this environment when we use plan mode as well. Alrighty, so this thing thinks that it's done one last time. This is probably going to be the last time we're going to try it. So let's flip into this and see what it's done. And look at that. Doesn't that look good? Let me just make sure this is the latest version. Yes. So this looks way better. As you can see, everything is less cluttered and squashed and crappy. And if we had started by just feeding it something like this, we would obviously have started with something that looks like this, which is much better than the crap that we started with the first time. But the point is that I wasn't optimizing for that from the beginning. I was optimizing for all this other functionality that we were doing from the beginning. And that's the importance of the difference of an approach, right? If we were just building a website, then priority number one, as part of it obviously working, is it looking extremely beautiful from the beginning. But when you're building an application, it's a very different thing because there are so many moving parts, because there's a back end, because it has very complex functionality. You want to focus on all of that stuff, the back end first, and then do the front end. So they're very different approaches, and I'll cover that in another video where we do these one-shot, really fast builds and stuff like that. This was more, like I keep saying, just something to explore thinking and get used to failure and iterating and changing stuff. Okay, and then one more thing before we leave. So what I've done now is I've just cleaned up the front end a little bit. If we have a look over here, you'll be able to see that I removed some of the panels that aren't really necessary anymore. For instance, we don't need the thumbnail generator. You'll soon find out why. And I also removed the ideas tab, and that's because script kind of handles everything now. So if we look over here, if I click on the script, you can see I can click on this button over here, and it will just go away and generate us a thumbnail from here, which I think is much better. And what I did is I baked in the functionality for it to generate based off of the script. But there's a little bit more to that. So we start with the script over here, so we analyze what it is. It comes up with an idea of what it thinks it should make the thumbnail. Now, generally with AI, it's going to make some flashy thing. Even if you put in a prompt, it kind of makes something that you might not really need. So we need to feed it not just a definition of good, but we also need to let it have its way with how it thinks the thing should be done, because maybe it comes up with a good concept, but then we also want to be able to edit it, and that's what we've got over here. So the workflow that I baked in is I have this little knowledge folder over here with the reference photo of me as just a headshot. And then I've got 3 of my best performing thumbnails over here. And the way this works is, we set it up earlier to use OpenAI's image gen or Nano Banana, whichever one we want. And it just uses these as reference points, it analyzes them, what they look like, things like that. And then it mixes that with this description that it creates over here in an ideal world. So let's have a look at what this thing is saying. AI suggestion. The script is about a specific income transformation 0 to 10K, which is highly clickable. Results style fits perfectly since it's a case study about measurable outcomes. The positioning pillar and consultant angle suggests professional styling rather than flashy. Alrighty. So the thumbnail concept. A thumbnail showing the transformation from having 0 clients to making 10K months through strategic case study approach that positions you as a consultant rather than a service provider. Now, we could run that and see what the AI generates. That might be pretty good. Most important thing is that we can choose the text overlay. So sometimes, again, you might get AI to come up with a concept of what text should be in here. For this thing, it suggested 0 to 10K, but you could change it whatever you want. Now, it depends on a few other factors, how much text you actually put in there. Sometimes one word is fine, if it creates enough curiosity or something like that. But I would say no more than 5 words, because then it starts to get too much for the brain to process while people are scrolling through their phones. So we look at the style, we've got results, we've got educational, bold, and minimal. Minimal is mostly what I go for some of my highest performing ones. But the video where most of you came from, which was the Claude bot one, that one was probably more bold and results driven because I had really bright colors, I had old way and new way. So it's kind of a mix of both. Then we can also choose where we want the person and preserve face. So keep your face exactly as it is from the reference photo. And that's important because for the most part, as long as you're like smiling in a photo, that attracts people to your thumbnail. Obviously, there are times where you need to show shock or concern or something like that, in which case we could click on this toggle button and then change it. And we can also include any additional context down here, which is exactly what we want. Now, I'm not going to go into depth in figuring this out in the video, otherwise, honestly, we'll be here for years. So what I am going to do is, now that I've kind of refined this system, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through each step in another video as a perfection layer. And that's where I'll do like the proper prompt engineering to teach you guys prompt engineering, to figure out how we can get our prompts perfect in here. We'll also perfect the thumbnail generator to make everything as it should be if we were going to be selling this as a production grade app. So for now, let's just check that the basic functionality is working. And we hit an error code immediately. Billing hard limit. There we go. So I've just hit my API limit, which is unfortunate. Because remember, if you're using an API, obviously this stuff is not using your subscription. So just keep that in mind if you are generating images or doing something outside of using Claude Code with your subscription or Codex, whatever it is. And there we go. I've topped up. We hit generate again. Now it's going to run away and do something. And we'll flash back when it's generated our thumbnail. And look at that. It totally morphed my face so I look like an alien. But it's not bad. It's not a terrible thumbnail. It could be clickable. I definitely think without, I haven't edited any prompts here. I haven't done anything crazy. I just asked the AI to tailor my face with this and then come up with an image that it sends to OpenAI. So that's pretty good. With a little bit of enhancement, we could say, don't touch my face at all. It's clearly not abiding to that rule, that little toggle that we have in there. But also maybe that's just the best the model is that we're currently using can do. So we've got to take that into consideration. Anyway, this will be covered in our next video where we perfect this system properly. But we can see here we've already got the ability to download it or view the full size or regenerate if this one sucks. Anyway, we can close this for now. So I think the user journey for the most part is here now because everything stems from the script. If we don't like the title, we can just regenerate it and it will come up with a few other variants for this title. So if we don't want from 0 clients to 10K months, we can just click on this toggle, probably take a minute or two, and it will generate us a whole bunch of new titles. Like this, because it's good to have multiple titles so you can A/B test them on your YouTube channel, but we can see here, these are far simpler and a lot shorter, which is probably better. How I got my first 10K client was 0 portfolio. That would definitely get clicks. What I'd do instead of free work in 2026, that would also get clicks. So these are really good titles. And, we could just select one of them, use it in the title. If I want to download this, I no longer have to copy and paste because I embedded a download button in here. All really simple stuff. You've seen me talk to Claude the entire time. So I just did that stuff off screen to save time because we've all been here a long time. So I think now the next goal is, because we've completed the bones of this system, it's definitely going to be that perfection thing because I will want to use this myself. But other than that, guys, thanks for sticking around this long. Hopefully it was helpful to you. If you have any comments, leave them below. Otherwise, check out the videos on the screen now. They're definitely going to help you on your journey. And I'll see you in the next one. Thanks for watching.